Council work meeting to order at 6 p.m. Members present this evening are actually in order as they're listed on the roster. Council members Kamara Sulak, CO, Del Orco, Dillon, Kraus, Mayor Pro Tem Girba, and Mayor Marl. From city staff, we have City Manager O'Toole, Clerk Royal, and Assistant City Manager Getzman. At this time, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the agenda of the work meeting, or approve the agenda for this work meeting as submitted unless there are amendments.
Submitted.
Let Dillon be the mover and CO be the second to approve as submitted. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. We'll proceed. There are no absences, so we'll proceed with public comments. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Are there any citizen comments? Very good. Then we proceed to the one and only discussion item of the evening, which is healthcare renewal, and the main presentation will be done by our representative, Beth, from Kapnick Insurance. City Manager O'Toole, would you like to begin and then yield the floor to our guest?
I'll yield directly so that you guys all have time for questions.
Very good. Beth, if you'd like to come to the podium, the floor is yours.
Good evening. Does everyone have a copy of the presentation? Okay, perfect. So I'm Beth Madziar with Kapnick Insurance Group. We've been working on your insurance renewals for many years. This year was a decent renewal from the Blues. Overall, the increase for the carriers, medical, dental, vision, life, and disability was just under $40,000. So I've definitely delivered a lot worse news this fall than this renewal, trust me. So we're talking strictly premiums, that $40,000 increase. That first page of the agenda kind of outlines it. For active employees, we know that's capped by PA 152. It was the $41,000 or $46,000. There was a decrease for the retirees of almost $5,000. That Medicare Advantage plan that we moved to several years ago is working, and everyone seems to be satisfied with it, even new retirees that move from maybe active employment to post-65, the Medicare Advantage plan, or moving from the pre-65 plan to the Medicare Advantage plan are pleased with the product. So that saved us money over the years. The Delta Dental renewal is a decrease. We'll talk about that. Your vision is flat. And your Hartford Life and Disability renewal, there's no change, and I'd like to talk about that in a little more detail towards the end. The interesting part is that the hard cap increase was only 1.3%. So when I look back in past years, last year was the highest at 3.7%, the increase. This year is the lowest, and I look back, 7 years, and that's the lowest. So that caps the exposure to the city at this renewal. We did unblend the rates. You might recall a few years ago, it was determined that the nature of the blended rate calculation adversely impacted the active employees because of the retiree population. So we went through the process in these numbers of unblending those rates. Overall, that $39,000 increase, I'm on the second page of the memo, of the $39,000 premium increase, the active unblended rate factor will impact the city by an expense of $15,471. I mentioned that the overall premium increase for insurance was $46,000 for active medical insurance. Employees are picking up about $30,000 of that, $10,000 by way of contribution to premium, so the amount coming out of their check will be increasing by approximately $10,000, and the employer contribution to the HSA would decrease by approximately $20,000, so leaving the $15,000 for active medical coverage to the city. We talked about the retiree insurance decreasing, as well as the active and retiree dental insurance. The active and retiree vision insurance is just a slight increase and no change for the life and disability. So once we factor in the PA 152 hard cap, we're looking at an increased cost to the city of just under $9,000 that's listed in that chart. Okay. We are limited to the alternative medical carriers that we can quote because of the percent of the population that's in the retiree divisions. And so That also limits us when we're looking at dental, and I know you had requested last year that we quote alternative dental carriers. We had that 10% increase with Delta Dental last year, and that limited the number of carriers that would provide quotes this year. We did obtain a quote from Emeritus. I'll tell you, it's not one of our preferred vendors, but we were able to get a quote that would save approximately $20,000 per year. With that quote, we negotiated with Delta Dental, and essentially they came back and gave us that, 1.5% rate decrease as goodwill. But they said, we don't know how they're coming up with this rate. That's what your claims cost, right? But what about their cost of administration, lights, cards, things like that? Caution there of it could really increase the rates when the rate locks up. So I'll just be candid. My concern would be it would impact your employees by way of their providers. Today, nearly 100% of the providers are in network between the PPO and the Premier networks with Delta Dental. They kind of have those two layers. Delta Dental was able to do a comparison of the network of who your employees are using today and their dependents for providers, and only 30% of the providers that they're using today would be considered in-network with Emeritus. So, yes, it would save the city, but we'd hear noise about it, and I'm concerned on the administration side. So I think by quoting, we were able to get a slight decrease from Delta Dental. I'm not standing here recommending moving forward with Emeritus, so, but we have a quote. We went to a couple other carriers, but they declined to quote because of the percent of the retiree population enrolled. One was Guardian. They have a dental, like a DHMO that sometimes saves money, but we weren't able to even get a quote from them. So, overall, we did also obtain a quote from Mutual of Omaha. They were our life and disability vendor prior to moving to the Hartford. In speaking with employees, one mentioned that the process for the short-term disability claims was a nightmare with the Hartford, and we've had issues on the administrative side. So I'd say we kind of got what we paid for by that move to Hartford. Our recommendation would be to move back to Mutual of Omaha, not only from an administrative standpoint, but also from an employee satisfaction when they're having claims standpoint. So we met with the healthcare committee. It was a strong recommendation to move forward with no changes to benefits this year. Okay.
Beth, anything else? We appreciate that. That was very streamlined, very efficient.
Okay.
No? Okay. Let's open it up for questions. We'll we'll probably have, well, my goodness. We will have opportunity for probably 2 or 3 rounds. So I'm going to start to my, I'll start to my left this evening and end to my right. So I'll begin with Councilmember Del Orco. You have 5 minutes if you have questions for our guests from Kapnick Insurance or any member of staff who's present, specifically the city manager or assistant city manager.
Yeah, I don't really have questions. I think your recommendations are sound, specifically sticking with Delta Dental and moving back to Omaha Mutual. I think you've done your homework and your research, and I feel strongly that we should move forward with your recommendations.
Easy enough. Thank you, Mr. Del Orco. Mayor Pro Tem Gearbach, questions for our guest.
Thank you. When you mentioned the Hartford, that sounds more like a customer service issue and follow-up. What was done to address that instead of spending another $12,000 or whatever to simply move to have a better accounting? Why were we not holding Hartford accountable for their behavior?
We are in the small business center based on size. We have the highest representative involved on a daily basis. We refuse to just go to the service center. We include him on everything, but it's the service model that we're struggling with the Hartford.
And is there a difference in Kapnick's, I guess I would commission or recovery going to Mutual of Omaha versus Hartford?
No.
Could you mention, and we always have to talk about when we're looking at cost savings and such, the difference between the 80% hard cap and what we could potentially save as a city, although it shifts the cost over to the employee?
Right. So if we wanted to move to the 80-20 cost share versus the hard cap, I think we'd need, we kind of talked about this, we would need to seek direction from council to determine what we could cover, right? Would it just be an 80-20% split on the insurance premiums, or would there be a split or an allowance for a contribution to the HSA? So I know we talked about that.
It's just, I think it's something that we'll have to have identified, as I believe our city manager and the treasurer are looking at cost savings
Yep.
in the next year, so we might have to have a little more information on that.
Yep. So there are other options instead of going all the way to an 80-20 split, right? Today, we do the hard cap option, but we could make our own hard cap, right? We don't have to go all the way to the 80-20 split, okay? So going to the 80-20 split would be very drastic, and you'd hear noise from employees, right? But if so the hard cap is the maximum amount that the city will pay or is allowed to pay for employees' coverage. You don't have to contribute that amount. We could say the hard cap is $50 less per month for employee and attack it that way versus making such a huge swing, if that makes sense.
Have we ever, in terms of Delta Dental, have we ever talked about a structured approach where, depending on the level of coverage you would have, similar to what I've been experiencing, it's like you have a certain, primarily it's just preventative care, or it goes to the next level, and you start paying a higher fee and coverage. Is ours all encompassing so that whatever we provide, they basically get the top level of care, or?
Can you say that a different way?
Sometimes there's ones where it's just preventative care, where basically they just cover the cost of cleanings, x-rays, and those type of things. Then you go to another tier, which may be for fillings, amalgams, other kind of care. And then you go to another level, but your individual premium increases as a result of the type of additional care you get. So
Okay.
I don't know if we've ever talked about that in terms of attempting to try and produce some more savings on our side, or whether or not that's not been considered.
So maybe a base buy-up situation, so you have a defined contribution that you pay
Yes.
for preventive care only, and then if you want to buy up to have additional coverage. We're pretty limited with the size of group that you are, as far as the number of plans that can be offered. We're in a fully insured environment, meaning there's no risk on the city. Typically, we might have a little more flexibility if we were self-funded and paying our own claims, but I haven't had a lot of success in getting any more than 2 plans offered in this group size. I've been told only 1 in this group size with under 100 lives.
And there's never any attempt to try and, or if not available, to merge with other organizations or other entities to which we would be able to benefit from that perspective? Or is it always, the insurance always just looking at the one small organization?
They're looking at the city of Saline, and your claims do have an impact.
I'm just looking at from whether or not, if you were to go in with another entity or another organization or city or governmental agency, whether or not that would benefit us as you get larger, so. All right, that's it for me, thank you.
Perfect. It was just about 5 minutes, Mr. Gearba. Councilmember Dillon, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you for all the information. I'll be honest, it was a little bit overwhelming to just sort of understand all of the groups. One of the things I've asked for a couple of years, and this is not on you, this is not on the city, I think it's just general statements, and maybe I need to codify it a little bit more, is understanding where we are with all of these groups. In that, are these people, is it individuals, is it a +1, is it family, the age? I mean, there's some general information that I think could help me, I don't want to speak for others, to understand these groups and where they sort of are in their life cycle as to, how many of these groups are going to be falling off maybe in 5 years, or is it going to be 25 years, that sort of thing. Do we have, I'm just not sure about that, because this is sort of the gift that just keeps giving, that we have so many groups, and as you said year after year, this is what our problem is and why we have to stick with the blues, is that nobody else wants to deal with so many categories And so I just, trying to understand that, I feel like we've just gotten pinched into the blues, that it's just a perpetual roller coaster with them. It's one year you've got a massive decrease, the next year you have an incredible increase. And it's very hard to plan accordingly for it. This year seems sort of a little bit middle of the road, which is good to see. But, you know, still a $41,000 increase is a lot. You did say that our premiums are based on our claims. Have we had excessive claims? Is there a chart for that? I apologize if there was, and I just.
There is not a chart. I can provide information. So you're what we call an experience-rated group with Blue Cross, and that would be for your active employees. And to kind of touch on that question, today you have 16 single contracts, 11 two-person contracts, and 22 family contracts of your active population. There are pre-65 retirees considered in the Blue Cross renewal that is experience rated with the Blues. So essentially, you're community rated with the pool, but there's a factor for your claims experience. In yours, where your claims are slightly higher than the book of business, the Blues take off claims dollars. In yours, when you're running better than the book of business, they add dollars to prevent these big swings. Right? This year, the Blues took off about $8,700. So when I open a renewal, I look to that page, and $8,700 to me says you're just slightly worse than the book of business. But that's not drastic, right? Last year, they took off $27,000 from your renewal from that credibility standpoint. So the bulk of your renewal is still community rated based on the overall Blue Book of Business, but there is a factor for your specific claims that's attached, okay?
Okay.
You had what we call 2 high-cost contracts in that active and pre-65 population, and your exposure as a group with the Blues is $100,000 per contract, so that's me, my spouse, my child. Together, if our claims exceeded $100,000, then it's forgiven beyond that, right? If I had $1 million transplant, only $100,000 would count against the city. So you had 2. That's a little bit high for a group your size. I maybe would expect 1, but we know there are ebbs and flows with claims, okay?
Okay, I appreciate that. The other thing I wanted to mention was the Mutual of Omaha versus the Hartford issue. I do look at that, as low-hanging fruit, as when we need to look at budgets and such. I guess you said one employee mentioned a nightmare with the Hartford. Do we know how many employees utilize that service? So is it 1 out of 12, 1 out of 50, 1 out of 3? I mean, just trying to understand that, so if one person had a negative experience.
That's the experience from a member perspective, but we've had a lot of issues. It's taking up a lot of L's time as far as a feed, like setting up a feed and reviewing the invoice monthly and things like that. So from an administrative standpoint, it's difficult as well. Al, do you have an idea of the number of short-term or long-term disability claims over the past couple of years? Okay.
And one thing I would add, if you noticed later in the actual agenda packet, City Manager Geschman has identified a cost-saving measure to cover the cost difference between the two. It is both her and my recommendation that we move forward with Mutual of Omaha because I've seen the significant difference in administrative time it's taken to manage these claims from one year to the next in terms of that changeover.
Let me stop you right there because we've eclipsed the 5 minutes. We will have opportunity for another round of questions.
Thank
Mr. Seal, you have 5 minutes if you'd like it.
Thank you, Your Honor. Can you help me understand a little bit how close are we to the ratio of retirees to active members that would allow more people to want to bid for our contract?
For the dental specifically, one cited 10% retirees. you're at about 40 for the dental, and another cited 30%. Oh, thank you. So,
So we're quite a ways off. Yeah, not something that's likely to change in the near term.
right.
Okay, that's the only question I had, Your Honor.
Easy enough. Councilmember Kamara Sulak, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you for the plethora of information. I'm trying to understand what the monthly cost has gone up on average for our employees, the 49 that are enrolled as active. I mean, I see how you have it spelled out on page 5.
So you can see the difference in the far right column between the employee contribution to premium from 22 to 23. So for example, in that first row, the Simply Blue PPO 500 will be going up $13.13 for a single, $32.62 for two-person, and $40.37 for a family.
Right, and that's strictly for the medical.
Just the medical, and that's the biweekly employee contribution to premium, the amount coming out of each check. And then you can see the contribution to the HSA is an annual number, the amount that's lower, for example, on the Simply Blue HSA 1,000 max plan.
Okay. Seems like a large burden on our employees. Is this typical? Are you seeing this with other municipalities?
Well, it's limited by the hard cap, right? So the hard cap increased 1.3%. And then beyond that, the responsibility is the employees to pick up the difference. Medical trend is just going to outpace the increase in the hard cap maximum. But at the end of the day, the city is still contributing generously to the HSA accounts. When we look at benchmark information, it's not like the city is below benchmark as far as contribution to premium or contribution to the HSA.
Okay, thank you. That's pretty much what I was trying to get at.
Yeah.
This is significant costs. But otherwise, based on, the data that you've provided, I support your recommendations.
At the end of the day, employees still have the choice, even for family coverage, to have a no-cost plan, no cost coming out of their check. And there's still dollars being contributed to the HSA on their behalf. You have a lot of long-term employees, and my guess is that there are a lot of employees with some savings in their HSAs as well. So it's pretty typical outside of the municipality world to see, a higher contribution to an HSA towards the beginning while employees accumulate funds in that HSA bank account, and then to taper off. So it's kind of following a strategy we would follow outside of the PA 152 world. Okay?
Very good. Thank you for your thoroughness.
Thank you, Councilmember Kamara Sulak. Councilmember Kraus, you have 5 minutes if you'd like it.
Thank you. The one thing I was thinking was what you just brought up, Kevin, is what's the city contributing on average compared to other municipalities? And so it seems like we're doing pretty well compared to what we have to work with. Is the retiree percentages, is that the biggest hindrance right now to getting other quotes and having other options, which we can't do anything about, so.
But I'd like to point out that most of my clients have the blues for medical, right? The blues have 75% market, or over 70% market share in Michigan, right? And when I'm quoting other clients where I can get a quote, really, Priority Health, HAP, we're not really getting a lot of quotes that are competitive.
Doesn't mean they'll take it.
Right, yeah. And then we can go to a national carrier, right? But what's that going to get us? Maybe they're buying business, right? I'm not saying it's limiting us from quoting other carriers, and there are 10 out there that might quote a better rate. At the end of the day, if they would quote with the retirees, we might settle on the blues are our best option anyhow. I think employees love having that blue card, just like they love having that Delta dental card in their pocket.
It's the rub. I mean, with Healthcare Task Force, which I'm not chair of anymore because we had new election, but the healthcare organizations we've been talking to all hone in on what's the majority of the insurance in your area. So it's connected but not, and Blue Cross is still, so even if we could quote these other options, it's still not maybe the best for more than one reason, not just our employees, but the city,
I don't have a carrier today that's consistently coming out with a competitive rate that will offer low disruption, right? I have a national carrier that will come out and maybe provide a low rate, but the next year, who knows what it will be. And they will flat out say to me, we have about an 80-20 satisfaction rule. 80% of your employees will be happy, but 20% will have, medical management, maybe a prescription they can't get, because we can offer it for a lower cost. So,
Okay, that's what I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Kraus. Okay, we'll do a second round if people have questions, concerns, comments. Mr. Delorco, did the conversation strike any interest to ask additional questions or raise concerns at this time?
I have nothing further, thank you.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh?
You had mentioned on the HSA benchmarks how we seem to be above and over. What is our comparable to any other city in general?
One moment. Can I look at my computer and get back to you?
Yeah,
I can't
that's
see
fine.
the-
I'm just curious to see where, because we have had other information from Sage when they did their assessment. It'd be interesting to know where we stand in terms of how we either exceed or are at benchmark. It's helpful to understand how our benefits compare when we are talking and negotiating contracts and so forth. So that's fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Nothing else, Mr. Gearbaugh?
Nope.
Okay. Councilmember Dillon, another 5 minutes?
Thank you. I think Mr. Gearba just sort of hit on the one that I was going to, is that obviously we want the best insurance for our employees and our retirees. We have to find that balance with the cost aspect of, you don't want to put the burden on them, but then again, the city's not going to. So that's what I was going to ask about, sort of where we stand with that HSA, and if there is options to look at changing that, or utilizing that as part of benefits, of a more comprehensive benefits package for employees going forward. So,
Can I say something to that
Yes.
point? So when I talk to my clients and they say, look, we need to save money, we either do it by way of contribution to premium, increasing the amount we ask from the employee out of each paycheck, or plan design, right? And in contribution, I'm including the HSA, right? Or plan design, or a combination of both, okay? Your BCN HMO, for example, had a 12% increase on that specific plan. It's a small portion of your population, but it had the highest number of employees enrolled in that plan. But when we looked at changing plan design, what would happen if we changed it? Employees could actually move to that $0 contribution to premium HSA 3000 and have money contributed to their HSA bank account, and the city's still paying the hard caps. You wouldn't save the dollars in premium by changing the plan design. So in our case, the way to save money would be to universally lower the amount you're paying per year for that employee, right? The hard cap is an annual maximum, but you're not required to pay up to it. You're just not allowed to pay more than it. So if you lowered it, it would then lower the HSA contribution and increase, like maybe I'm on the traditional PPO, it would increase the amount I'm having taken out of my paycheck, And that would keep it even across all plan designs and still allow employees to have choice. My point is, if we impact one, maybe the HSAs, then everyone moves over to the traditional PPO plan. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
I think we'd have to lower that cap across the board, or else employees could potentially, do you know what I'm saying?
No, I really appreciate the way that you just said that, because that really kind of helps me hone in on understanding that, so.
Well, Colleen pointed it out, right? You know, she said, look, this HMO plan has the greatest increase. Could we do something here? We could, but then it might just move people to the HSA and you're still paying the same amount, and now they felt the disruption, you know?
Right. Okay. And then, so I'm gonna move off the Blues and go back to Delta Dental for a quick second. So Delta Dental wants us to lock in for 2 years at the rate that they're giving us now? And,
Well, it's a protection to you, right? Meaning they won't raise the rate next year.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
It was we had a flat for 1-year renewal, and then they came back and said, we'll decrease it slightly and hold it for 2 years.
Okay, I'm gonna stop there. I guess I'll just ask the city manager very quickly. So are you gonna sort of talk through your proposal for absorbing the Mutual of Omaha costs, or are you gonna wait until regular meeting to do that?
I think when we get to the regular meeting, Assistant City Manager Geschman has it in her memo, and she will touch on how she intends to absorb those costs.
Perfect, thank you very much.
Very good. Mr. Seal, you have another 5 minutes if you'd like it.
Nothing else, Your Honor.
Very good. Councilmember Kamara Sulak.
I have nothing further.
Okay, Councilmember Kraus.
Nothing further, thank you.
Easy enough. Beth, before we wrap this up, anything you'd like to add for the record?
No, thank you.
Okay. Any additional comments or questions from council? City Manager O'Toole, anything you'd like to add? Or Assistant City Manager Getzman? Easy enough. Thank you. Well, we will revisit this issue when we convene into our regular session at 7 p.m. Thank you all. Okay, referring back to the agenda, unless there is anything else to be brought forward as a discussion at this time, the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn this work meeting at 6:32 p.m.
So moved?
Moved by Kamara Sulak. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Del Orco. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. This meeting is adjourned. We will start promptly at 7 p.m. to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. For those of you who are in the audience, there's a sign-in sheet on the back along with copies of the agenda and hearing aids in the back basket. Those members present this evening, from City Council are Council Members Kamara Sulak, CO, Delorco, Dillon, Kraus, Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, and Mayor Marl. From City Staff, we have City Manager O'Toole, Clerk Royal, Assistant City Manager Getzman, Wastewater Treatment Superintendent Briggs. I'm not sure DPW Director Searles is here. City Engineer Humphreys, and Parks and Rec Director Scruggs. At this time, the Chair would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as submitted unless there are amendments. As submitted. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh. Is there a second?
Second?
Seconded by Councilmember Dillon. All those in favor of approving the agenda as submitted signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. There are no absences this evening, so we'll proceed to citizen comments on agenda items. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question on an item that appears on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Are there any citizen comments on agenda items?
I haven't had a chance to actually go over the agenda, but I think it's the same old, as I've been known to say. I just wanted to make a statement and a request from the city on the ongoing water and sewage rate increase. I'm a little bit more prepared tonight than I was in the past, so I apologize for that. Over the past few months, a clearer picture has begun to emerge regarding the present water sewer issue facing the citizens of Saline. It appears this is not only a story about exorbitant water and sewage rates, but also city governments, past and present, failure to address the wastewater infrastructure needs of the city over a period of decades. The impression many citizens are left with is that the root cause of this has been a matter of mismanagement of funds and political convenience rather than a lack of resources. Due to city government's failure to adequately address the questions and concerns of its citizens, in addition to multiple media reports that conflict with city government's narrative, I would ask City Council and City Management to compile a comprehensive report and release the following records in an easily accessible and understandable format in order to fulfill city government's duty to inform all citizens, including the marginalized, elderly, and those who may lack internet access. Bullet 1. The operating budget of the wastewater treatment facility over the last 20 years or more, along with any additional appropriations for maintenance and necessary upgrades to the wastewater treatment facility. Any and all budget requests related to the wastewater treatment facility made to city government by the superintendent of the wastewater treatment facility and or the city manager and or any other applicable city employee over the last 20 years. Council voting records for any and all measures over the last 20 years pertaining to the operating budget of the wastewater treatment facility, any additional appropriations for maintenance and upgrades, and council voting records for any and all measures pertaining to water and sewage rates. State of Michigan inspection reports of the wastewater treatment facility, including any and all fines assessed to the city by the state of Michigan over the last 20 years. Records pertaining to any and all wastewater spills into the storm drainage system and or the Saline River as reported to the Michigan Department of the Environment, and any and all associated fines over the last 20 years. Any and all records pertaining to connection fees assessed by the city for any and all new commercial, industrial, and residential development within the city over the last 20 years. It is self-evident that these records are not only of vital interest to the tax-paying citizens of Saline, but also to any and all communities, navigable waterways, and wetland systems located downstream of the wastewater treatment facility. While we are fully able to seek the aforementioned records via FOA request. We want to give city government an opportunity to do the right thing.
Toby,
And-
I got to stop you there, my friend. We've reached the 3-minute threshold. If you would like to provide a written copy of that document, specifically those bullet points that you articulated, that would be very helpful, and we would be happy to gather that information and share it either at or in advance of our budget town hall that's going to occur later this month. Thank you. Any additional citizen comments on agenda items? You will have 3 minutes.
Hi there, Shelley Andrews, Torwood. Again, it's on the water rates that, in our latest bills. Just a follow-up to that and a note about transparency. There are still many, many questions about the bills that we had this time around. The rates are off the charts. They don't match the rates that we were given. The usage for a lot of people are really out of this world. They're really off from what they are used to seeing year over year. And then many people online on Nextdoor confirmed that their adjustments were between $10 and $15, which were not really, were pretty negligible compared to, the billing overage. So I'm asking for transparency in in comparing last year's bill to this bill. What part of it was the increase that goes toward the water treatment plant? Which part of this is, we know how much, it was for the billing error, but I'd like to know what the exact increase was. Was it 34%? Was it 54%? Because we're seeing huge discrepancies in our bills. So I think this is what people want to know, is like how much are we, what were we actually, what was the actual increase this time around? And what can we expect for the next bill and next year? Because I think, what we were told was not what happened. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional citizen comments on any agenda items? Then I would defer to the city clerk. Any yes, please. You'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Patty Safarth, and I was surprised when I opened this is about the water and sewer bill. I was surprised when I opened mine because I'm a very conscientious person since I live alone, so that I don't overspend on utilities. My history of usage, so I went back initially and looked at my history of usage, and it averages for the last 3 years about 4,000 or 5,000 gallons per quarter. My most recent bill was for 11,000. So I went online, I listened to your last meeting to see what kind of citizen comment you had and what kind of input we got from the city. So I called the water department, and a fellow came out and he checked things out. He said I did not have any leaks, asked me about water for my lawn and things like that. But I'm in a condo and I use the same amount of water more or less every year. The thing about it was that when I started looking at some of the details, I found that my increase in usage was not due to a new meter, because my meter was installed after the cutoff for that period. I also found that, and if I'm wrong, I apologize, but I did an analysis of my bills, and I found that in fact the new bill shows a 40% decrease in the water rate. I added the two rates together, there's two line items. I compared them to the last bill, and I came up with a 40% decrease. And then I looked at the sewage, and that was showing a 20% decrease. So I hope I don't get a revised bill, and now my bill is 10 times higher because somebody goofed. But in my estimation, I believe that the reason for the increase in usage, not so much the rates, I'm not focusing on the rates, is because of some calculation that some computer somewhere miscalculated at some point in time, let's call it a hiccup, and suddenly I'm using 11,000 gallons instead of 5,000 gallons. The reason I came up here, my comments do not compare to the original gentleman, But the reason I'm here is because I know a lot of people just get their bill, pay their bill, don't think twice about it. And I think something definitely happened. I don't know how it happened, where it happened, but I personally, as a citizen, would like to see a report in the next, when we get our next bill, there's a newsletter. I would like to see a report so that everyone can understand the discussion that's been going on and the analysis and hopefully some results. So, thank you.
Perfect on your timing, Patty. Patty, I didn't catch your last name.
Safe part.
Very good. I'm not sure what your schedule is like this evening, if you're able to stick around for the entire meeting, but it does sound like there may be some discrepancies with your bill. So I do want to make sure that at some point you're connected with staff, likely the city manager's office, so that she can talk to you or have one of her subordinates get in touch with you. Are there any additional citizen comments on agenda items? There appear to be none. Clerk Rowe, did we receive any in writing in advance of tonight's meeting? We did not. Okay. Then we will proceed with the consent agenda. Thank you all for your comments this evening. We'll be addressing a number of those concerns and questions at various points throughout tonight's agenda. At this time, we move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda will normally be adopted without discussion unless there is a request from a citizen or council member. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve as submitted, Mr. Kamir Sulak?
Motion to approve as submitted.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember CO. Is there any discussion? There is none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. We move on to business item, which is essentially the first action item on tonight's agenda of substance, which is public hearing, agenda item 22-257, special land use for medical marijuana provisioning center at 813 West Michigan Ave. First, we need a motion to open the public hearing, affording the public an opportunity to speak to this issue at 7:11.
So moved?
Moved by Dillon to open the public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Kraus. All those in favor of opening the public hearing signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. Motion carries unanimously. Public hearing is now open. If you'd like to speak to this issue, specifically a potential medical marijuana provisioning center at 813 West Michigan Ave, you may come forward, and you will be limited to 3 minutes per person.
Hi, my name's Matthew Rockwell. I've been reading about this issue, and you guys do not take it under your heads. I'm sick and tired of it. If you guys cannot figure it out, we've had meth, almost every drug, fentanyl coming in to this country. You hear about it on the news daily. If you want fentanyl to kill somebody, go right ahead. Let it kill your kids. Let it kill somebody out there on the road. This marijuana thing needs to stop here in this city. If you guys cannot stop it in this city, I do not care for your city council anymore. You guys cannot run one single thing right. Any of you cannot run something right to let this keep going. Because there's gonna be kids that buy this stuff and then go around and turn around and sell it on the black market. Plain and simple. I've seen it in Ann Arbor, I've seen it in Ipsy, I've seen it in other places. And you guys cannot do something right. Mr. CO, you were a cop. You probably would have stopped somebody if this was sold because it was in a park. You can get it and turn around and resell the stuff. It's not that easy. I've talked to numerous cops, and you guys cannot get it through your thick skulls. I don't know what's wrong with you, but if this keeps up, then I'm leaving. I don't think it's right for a kid to see marijuana dispensed in this city whatsoever. It's wrong. We have numerous officers out there, and they're going to be looking for this stuff. It could be fentanyl, it could be anything, and you guys just don't want it to appear. Fine. fine. Let some kid get so high, then go get in a car accident and kill himself. Think. If any of you guys have kids, think before you decide. That's all I'm asking. You guys can't do one single thing right. Fentanyl is coming into this country left and right. We have other people that are coming in from this country left and right. You guys are nuts.
Thank you, Mr. Rockwell. Any additional citizen comments on a potential medical marijuana provisioning center at 813 West Michigan Avenue? Is there a motion then to close the public hearing at 7:15?
So moved.
Moved by Gearba, let Kraus be the second. All those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. Public hearing is now closed. Let's start with a simple motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo dated October 4th, 2022 from Recording Secretary Ritchie.
Motion to acknowledge?
Motion by Dillon to acknowledge, seconded by Kraus. Community Development Director Harrington, in Recording Secretary Ritchie's absence, do you care to comment on this issue?
Absolutely. So the applicant actually is not in attendance tonight, so they've asked that you postpone action until they can be in attendance at your next regularly scheduled council meeting. You just held a public hearing for it, but the item can then be revisited at the November 21st city council meeting. But suffice to say, in brief, and I'll give you the brief at the next meeting as well, this is for a medical provisioning center. Their adult use application was already slated and has already been noticed for November 21st. The site is right next to the Village Party and Liquor Store, right off Michigan Avenue. It was pretty contentious in the Planning Commission, although we did end up receiving, I believe, unanimous approval. If not, there was maybe one denied vote. Effectively, the conversation really surrounded parking on the site. As many of you might know, the Metro Dance Studio is also located there, and parking has been a concern on the site for quite some time. So with the revised agreement, both this lot and the lot directly to the south, which includes 7 prefabricated industrial buildings, will now have a joint parking agreement with updated signage. Both lots will be restriped, and that met the Planning Commission's concerns over parking. And there's now a permanent parking easement that's been recorded with the county. And due to ingress-egress requirements, should that be ceased at any point, there would be deeper considerations over how one would get into the rear lot, meaning that the lots necessitate one another because of their access. So the parking agreement will exist in perpetuity, and I believe we reached a healthy compromise to deal with the parking concerns at the lot.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Harrington. Are there any questions for our Community Development Director regarding his presentation or his recommendation or staff's recommendation more broadly to postpone consideration of this issue until December 5th, 2022?
It's actually November 21st. We worked that out, so we don't have to rehold the public hearing, I believe.
Do you have to have a second public hearing?
We do not.
Oh, okay.
So it was originally our concern is we'd have to renotice, but now that we have realized we do not have to renotice, we can just hold it at the November 21st meeting in conjunction with their adult use special land use that will also be coming before you that evening.
Okay, thank you.
So I stand corrected. So it would be a motion to postpone to November 21st, 2022 at 7 p.m.
That is correct.
Okay. And we have confirmation that the petitioner will be present.
That is correct.
Very good. Additional questions for Mr. Harrington? Any discussion on the motion moved by Dillon, seconded by Kraus, simply to acknowledge receipt of the memo dated October the 4th? Then we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of acknowledging, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Is there a motion now to postpone consideration of this issue until our next regular meeting of November 21st, 2022 at 7 p.m.?
So moved.
Moved by Camara Sulak to postpone and seconded by Seal. Is there any additional discussion? Mr. Gearba.
The only thing I always had this concern of doing a public hearing and then having the discussion of the issue at another meeting. So I had this concern at Planning Commission when we did something similar at one point in time. I just don't believe we should separate them like that. And so I'm just making that statement. I don't know in the future if we can avoid that.
Right, I believe that would be the preference. The applicant had last-second medical appointments that came up. I believe they had a case of COVID that lasted longer than anticipated, thus the reason for postponement. However, I will add that it was already noticed for their adult use, which is previously slated for that date. So other folks have been alerted of a special land use for adult use marijuana. This one was just for medical. But yes, that will be obviously our intention and preference in the future is that they're held together.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Any additional discussion on the motion or comments from the floor? There appear to be none. It's been properly moved by Camara Sulak, seconded by CO to postpone to November 21st. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to unfinished business, item 22-236, community event policy. Let's start with just a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from City Clerk Royal.
So moved?
Moved by Gearbaugh to acknowledge receipt. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dillon. Clerk Royal, do you care to make any comment at this time?
No, we just had some updates that were needed to be made, and we also had the attorney review it, and I think we got everything cleared up, but I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
And my apologies, I didn't acknowledge the attorney who's in the audience this evening. Good evening, Tony. Thank you for being here. City Manager O'Toole, any comment that you'd like to make, and then I will defer to legal counsel in the event that he would like to make a comment as well.
Just that I did receive some written comments from Councilmember Dillon. If it is council's intention to approve tonight, which would be staff's recommendation, that you do so, allowing me to make those edits.
Very good. City Attorney? No? Okay. Well, hang tight, because there might be questions best addressed by you. Are there questions for the City Clerk, City Attorney, or City Manager? Mr. Gearbaugh?
I'd like to know what the edits are.
Yeah.
So the edits, I mean, it's Janet, guys, so there's a lot of red lines here. They're mostly,
Does Councilmember, I don't mean to interrupt, does Councilmember Dillon want to go over her own edits? It's your call, but if they're your recommendations or your changes, perhaps you'd like to speak to them directly.
No, that's fine. I can quickly go through them. Some of them were just thoughts, some were comments. The one thing that, when we talk about on the first page on definitions, we talk about photographs and promotional activities, is understanding what does that mean. If somebody were to go, if a photographer were in our parks, at the farm, doing photos, I mean, obviously, they would not need to fill this out. So kind of just understanding the parameters of that a little bit more. And I'm just going to go through some of the questions that I had, and it was on the application process, whether it was a paper or online version and such. And one of the big factors for me that kept coming through was that I think it would be easiest for the applicant if it was sort of a one-stop shop of somebody owned this task, like the clerk, everything got filed, because there's aspects of it that go to the building department, aspects that go to the city manager, and asking the applicant to sort of find those people, I think, could cause some confusion, and it could cause confusion for staff to just receive a piece of something. So if the clerk could sort of be the clearinghouse of the application and all the pieces to it, and then kind of send it off in whichever direction it needs to go, I think that may be a little bit easier.
No objection to that.
Yeah. When we talk about our city parks, and what we don't talk about at all is whether that includes the farm and the depot. And so I wasn't sure if we need to include them and how that would work.
We would have to get approval from the Historical Society because they have control of those.
Yep.
So we would not grant usage of those two facilities.
So they would, if somebody wanted to do something at the farm, they would have to go through the Historic Society, and there's their own process.
Correct.
Okay, very good. So no, there were, there's just a couple, like I said, I'm just gonna hit upon the basic ones that I really wasn't sure about. What I wanted to know is there's certain situations where we talk about, like, say, for example, with block parties, that the city will deliver them. I'm apprehensive about committing the city to anything, so I like the wording to be that if staffing is available, things like that, that it would be, because I think 9 times out of 10, people are gonna choose to have those barricades delivered because they're not gonna fit in a standard vehicle. And so if it's in the middle of getting ready for a festival or something like that, I just want to make sure and understanding about that. There was a question about, there's a section that's, it's not missing, it's just misnumbered, I guess. There's no section 4, which is referenced. Then when we talk about rentals of like porta-johns and stuff, understanding whether or not applicants have to utilize our stuff. or the way that it's worded, it sounds like they have to get all of their items through the city, and I just wasn't sure about that.
Well, we would want them to do that because like, we want to be able to say you have to have if you're expecting 100 people, you need at least 2 porta-johns. If you're getting 200 people, you're going to need 4 porta-johns. And we want to be able to order those on their behalf, and then they would pay us for those. The DPW would request those and have them set up.
Okay. I guess my whole thing is that then we're sort of getting even more involved with our staff and our staff time managing somebody else's
Well,
party.
I think maybe you're overanalyzing this because we don't get a lot of these. Ours are usually our general ones. It's just like, we've got one last year that kind of set all this off. But I think we don't get a whole bunch of these in a year. Most of ours are just return events.
Right.
And this is trying to resolve issues for that odd event out that is not covered. So I don't know if we're going to be able to fix every single item that you might be concerned about, but we might be able to fix it as we go along, as we find issues.
No, that's fine. Like I said, I just don't want to overcommit our staff to being that involved into events to where we're managing, you know, the ordering of porta-johns, the pickup of porta-johns, things like that, when groups can be doing that themselves if needed.
Right, well, we did have DPW Searle sit in on these meetings, and he was aware of it, but like I said, we don't get that many beyond our normal yearly events, that he felt that that was something that they couldn't handle.
Okay, that's fine. My other big concern was that just the confirmation process of, does that fall to your office to follow up to make sure? Because we'll give sort of a conditional approval, and then it's like, but you have to do this, this, and this. Is that gonna, your office would follow up to make sure that those were actually done?
Correct, and if there was a tent permit, I would get with the building department. If there's DPW electrical issues, I'd get with the DPW. There will be a checklist at the end where we will have everybody sign off that everything has been completed before their permit will be issued. And they will receive an actual permit.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, that's sort of it in a nutshell. I mean, like I said, there were some other questions that the city manager was able to address.
Very good. City Manager O'Toole, I apologize for cutting you off. Is there anything else that you'd like to add at this time?
No, that's it.
Additional questions or comments from the dais? Again, we're just entertaining a motion to acknowledge receipt at this time. Mayor Pro Tem Gearboff.
Just a question for the city manager. You feel comfortable with the policy as it is, unless these other items are procedural, which I believe your staff will be handling?
Yeah, most of the changes that Councilmember Dillon shared, I feel are simple enough procedural changes or small wording changes that we can make to put this policy in place. From our perspective, we'd like to see this policy enacted so that we can actually start accepting applications under this policy instead of getting into a situation next year where some events will be covered under our previous policy and some under this.
So pretty much you're just asking that we accept the minor, either grammatical or little mistakes, whatever, in terms of.
Yeah, I mean, there are some small substantive changes, just in terms of, like Councilmember Dillon shared, identifying who the point person specifically will be. I will be happy to send out a revised copy, but yes, I believe the motion then should be to accept the policy as it will be amended by the city manager.
Thank you.
Additional questions or comments? No? Any discussion on the motion then? There's none. We have a motion on the floor moved by Gearboss, seconded by Dillon to acknowledge receipt of the memo from Clerk Royal. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Clerk Royal, City Manager O'Toole, I was going to defer to you again. Can you restate that verbiage that you articulated just moments ago?
To approve with revisions to be performed or completed by the city manager.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, so it's a motion to approve with,
Revisions to be completed.
revisions, approve with revisions completed by the city manager. So that was moved by Mayor Pro Tem Gearbo. Was that seconded by Councilmember CO?
Yes, sir.
Very good. Is there discussion on the motion? Ms. Dillon?
Thanks. I just wanted to say thank you to the city manager and to the clerk. I know that I think we're on draft 3 or 4 of this, and you've been great indulging my comments and questions. And for the public, this is what I used to do for a living, was review documents, so I like to wordsmith them. So I appreciate you indulging me in that. Thank you.
Any additional discussion from the dais? Comments on the motion? Okay. There's an amended motion moved by Gearboss, seconded by CO to approve. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 2023, insurance renewal. And this was actually a discussion item at our work meeting immediately prior to tonight's regular meeting. So this would be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from Assistant City Manager Getzman and to approve or not to approve the 2023 insurance renewal with no changes to medical, dental, or vision coverage, and to approve or not to approve the quote from a Mutual of Omaha for life and disability coverage.
Move to acknowledge, approve, and approve.
Okay, it's been moved by CO to acknowledge, approve, and approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Del Orco. Assistant City Manager Getzman, the floor is yours, and if you would be so kind to provide some additional comments on the package provided by the Mutual of Omaha, that would be great.
Yep, so obviously we got the renewal. Beth from Capnick is still here in case anyone has any additional questions, and we gave you guys some benchmark information to look at as well. But the Healthcare Committee, which has representatives from across all departments and bargaining units, met a couple times in October and would like to recommend that we keep our benefit levels for medical, dental, vision the same, and also keeping the life insurance benefit the same, but switching our provider back from where it is Hartford to Mutual of Omaha, which does involve an additional cost of, it's listed here, the $13,000 some dollars. As the memo outlines several issues that we've had with them, me personally, Beth can also attest to, in terms of having to go back and make changes, double payments of benefits, people waiting on benefits when they need things to be paid out. You know, if you're waiting on a paycheck and that money is not coming from the provider, it can be stressful at an already stressful time if you're dealing with an injury. So just things like that. And so we propose taking that $13,000 from the SAGE line, because we don't foresee using all $32,000 budgeted for SAGE HR services this year. I think we mostly have everything in control, but we still will have enough money in there, even taking the $13,000 out, to engage SAGE with trainings, and if anything did pop up that was a larger HR-related issue. So that's, and talked with City Manager O'Toole, and she's on board as well, so I think that covers it, and again, Beth is here still if anyone has additional questions.
Beth, I will provide as a guest, I'll provide you an additional opportunity if you'd like to make any remarks for the public record. No, you're good? Okay. City Manager O'Toole, anything you'd like to add?
Just reiterating for the public's edification, for those that didn't attend the work meeting, these are very favorable rates compared to what our consultants have seen elsewhere, and the city continues to provide a very comprehensive and competitive benefit package to try and retain employees.
Very good. Excellent. Questions for staff or our consultant from Capnick? Councilmember Dillon.
Thank you. I think I say this every year, and I'm going to kind of state it again, is that I firmly believe that someone from council or someone that does not have a vested interest in employee benefits needs to sit on the benefits committee. We have employees making decisions on their own benefits, and I think that everybody's looking out for the best interests of the city. But I do think that it would be beneficial to have somebody in there that is not receiving the benefits.
Yeah, I think if council would like to appoint someone from its body to be that liaison, we'd be happy to include them.
I think that's an easy enough fix, and I'd ask the city clerk to make note of this. Why don't we just incorporate that into our January agenda when we make our normal council appointments to the various boards, committees, and working groups that function within our municipal portfolio. Please.
Oh, thank you. The only other thing that I have is the budget line item. I appreciate that we're moving things. I just feel like it's not really like to like. You know, we're taking a professional services, HR, and then reutilizing it as a benefit. So it sort of looks a little odd that we're taking from sort of the wrong place.
I guess my counterpoint on that would be I've seen firsthand the amount of administrative time that's been wasted dealing with this other provider. So to me, it seems like those are dollars being spent on either staff or consultant time that are not being wasted, so to speak, with the inefficiencies of the firm that we were previously using.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Gearba?
Just clarification, since we'll be shifting this, I guess this would be this effort onto Mutual of Omaha instead of being on L, will that provide her the backfill so that she'll be able to support the Historical Society at the same level Miley did? I mean, the Historical District?
Elle is, I'm sure, happy to share that she is fully and deeply committed to her appointment on the Historic District Commission, though I will say it is my goal that that will be a short-term assignment as we look to fill a new position within the organization that supports the community development and engineering department and has more of a focus on the non-infrastructure related capital projects, which would include our historic properties.
Okay. And do you anticipate any other, well, I guess my issue is now with this additional time freed up, what other assignments she'll be doing? Instead of the,
Specific assignments?
not specific, but hopefully it'll free up her time.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gearba. I do want to remind those in the audience, please put your phones on vibrate and please mute them. We would appreciate that. Any additional comments, questions from the dais, specifically for our Assistant City Manager? No? Al, thank you very much. Beth, thank you for your time this evening. Is there any discussion on the motion moved by CO, seconded by Del Orco to acknowledge, to approve, and to approve? There is none. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 22-252, notice of intent CW SRF project. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from City Manager O'Toole and to adopt or not to adopt resolution number 252.
Move to acknowledge and adopt.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Gearba to acknowledge and to adopt. Is there a second? Seconded by CO. City Manager O'Toole, the floor is yours.
Thank you. This notice of intent resolution is simply part of the process to move forward with securing the state revolving fund loan dollars that will be needed for our wastewater treatment plant rehabilitation. This is the resolution that will allow us now to public notice this once again and open up a referendum period that lets residents weigh in during that time regarding the project plan. We do have copies of the project plan available either digitally or in print if anyone is interested, or certainly myself or members of staff are more than happy to answer any questions about what that project actually entails.
Because there have been some inferences in the past and even some tonight, can you talk to or speak to why it is advantageous for us as a community to leverage SRF dollars for the wastewater treatment rehabilitation?
Absolutely. So right now, particularly given the bond market, the rates that we're seeing through the SRF program are untouchable. I believe 2.125% is the rate at which we secure financing for this project. And again, if anyone has any experience with finances, you know, 1 percentage point even, we're really in this market probably looking at 2 to 3 percentage points, is tens of millions of dollars for a project that is $64 million to begin with. Again, that's very good news for us because when we did the rate study this past season, we assumed a much more conservative rate. I believe it's right around 3%. So that will be reflected when we update our rate study this year. And one thing I have shared with council, and I believe there's general consensus to move forward with, is holding off on any additional rate changes until we can perform that next rate study, which will probably mean nothing occurring until December 1 of 2023.
Very good. Questions for the city manager? Mr. Gearba, please.
Can you just clarify, it says, you know, for the referendum, it would be date of publishing this notice. Is that the Sun Times in which it will be posted? And we anticipate within the next week?
Yes, I would defer to Clerk Royal about when we get things in for posting. What's the typical date for?
If I send it tomorrow, it will be posted next week.
Okay.
That's soon, thank you. Okay.
And Sun Times is generally the newspaper that you use for public notices, correct?
Correct, but it is election day, so it may be.
Maybe till Wednesday.
And the hard copy comes on Thursday.
That's okay.
Very good. Anything else, Mayor Pro Tem Gearba?
No, thank you.
Additional questions from the dais? Any discussion on the motion? Then we have a motion on the floor moved by Mayor Pro Tem Gearba, seconded by Councilman CO to acknowledge and to adopt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 22-276, wastewater treatment plant rooftop makeup air unit. This will be a motion to acknowledge the memo from Superintendent Briggs and to approve or not to approve the purchase of a rooftop unit in the amount of $41,140.
Move to acknowledge and approve.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Gearbout to acknowledge and to approve. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Dillon. I'll get you on the next one, Mr. Delarico. Superintendent Briggs, would you care to come to the podium and maybe provide a brief synopsis of your recent memo?
Certainly. So initially in the capital improvement plan earlier in the year, I had two of these units inserted, one for this building and one for the influent building. They were in the plan for $38,000. Because of the timing, obviously the costs have increased to the $41,000 mark. But the one for this building is definitely needed. We had problems all through last winter with it, trying to keep it going. And the one for the influent building appears to be a newer unit, and after working with it over the last few months, it's not nearly as in a bad shape as the other one is. Plus, on top of that, if we go into the SRF project, that influent building is probably some of the use of that's gonna go away. So we may not need that unit at all in the future, so.
Mr. Briggs, for the public's edification, why is this rooftop unit important?
Well, it provides all the heat for the filter building, where we have a lot of water going through, and if it's not warm, could be problems this winter.
Excellent, very good. Questions for Superintendent Briggs? Easy enough, Bill, thanks.
You're welcome.
Any discussion on the motion? Then we have a motion on the floor moved by Mayor Pro Tem Gearboss, seconded by Dillon to acknowledge and to approve. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 22-279, meetings on holiday, resolution number 22-279. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from City Clerk Royal and to approve or not to approve resolution 22-279, meetings on holidays.
Move to acknowledge and approve.
Moved by CO to acknowledge and approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Camara Sulak. Clerk Royal, do you care to comment on your memo?
Yes, we were looking at dates for next year for city council, and we were wanting to make sure that we did not schedule on any holiday that you guys did not want to meet on. We're looking at Juneteenth as a new holiday. It's not, the city employees don't get it off, but it is recognized as a holiday, so we would be moving that date that the city council meeting to a different date. And then the other thing we were looking at doing is we were trying to decide if council would like to move meetings to Tuesday for those meetings that we can't meet on Monday, so that we don't have to have back-to-back meetings. It's just whatever you would prefer. It's easier to have the bills and for the packets if we have a little more time in between. And sometimes it seems like we have a long time between meetings, and sometimes we have back-to-back meetings.
Yeah, I can start this off, and then we can hear from everybody on the dais. I don't have strong feelings one way or the other. I wouldn't have any objections to, on occasion, meeting on Tuesdays. My concern would be how would that impact the various boards, commissions, and committees that meet and are part of our municipal portfolio. Off the top of my head, I don't know how many meet on Tuesday evenings, but I wouldn't want it to conflict with that. Does anybody else have thoughts? Councilmember Kraus? No?
No.
Mr. Kamir Sulak?
I ditto your comments.
Okay.
I know that there's, at the very least, this Saline Council meets on the third Tuesday of every month. Yeah, so I imagine there's probably at least another commission or board.
Does Parks meet on a Tuesday? Yeah.
Yes.
I have a question.
I'll get you in just one second, Mr. Mr. Delarico. If you don't have anything further, Mr. Kamir Sulak, Mr. CO, any thoughts?
No, I give a lot of credibility to the city clerk's desire not to have too much time between meetings. And, I think that having a meeting on a Tuesday, if it doesn't conflict with other meetings in this space, would be worthwhile.
Okay, very good. Ms. Dillon?
So there's 3 occasions when we have Monday holidays. So there's the MLK, there's President's Day, and Juneteenth. And so that would be 3 months. Based on this proposed resolution, we would be changing our meetings instead of the first and third Mondays to the second and fourth. which could also cause issues with other groups. I think, I'm concerned with the public understanding that we're going to be changing meetings too much. So I don't know what the best thing to do is, if it's to roll to the next, so that we sort of keep a consistent thing. I understand what you're saying of, you, sometimes then you have back-to-backs, or you have a 3-week gap. And so I know sometimes we have issues. So I guess my question was, can we just play it by ear? Instead of taking formal action now, could we just play it by ear and see what, like, that January agendas are gonna look like, and say, oh yeah, we can have back-to-back because they're gonna both be light, or, you know what, we're gonna have too much, so we need to roll them around.
So the only thing I would recommend is if we're gonna do that, kind of take it year by year, that we then rescind the existing resolution, because right now that resolution is kind of guiding us, and technically, that's how we should be required to change our meetings. So part of this resolution was to add Juneteenth as one of the holidays that we would consider changing the council schedule for. But there still exists that resolution for MLK and President's Day.
Just for the group's benefit and the audience, and Mr. Gearbaugh has actually been around a little bit longer than I have. During my entire tenure as both a mayor and council member, we've always had back-to-back meetings in January and February because of the holidays. I have not viewed that as particularly problematic, especially in January, where, as I reflect back on my tenure, we haven't had really robust agendas. They've been pretty light, especially in terms of substantive action items.
Well, the January meeting generally is your state of the address, the state of the city, and then just the swearing in of our new council members, so.
Board and commission appointments, some perfunctory things.
Some minor things
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah. Go ahead,
So,
continue.
that's okay, thank you. The other thing that I think we've talked about when we're trying to schedule supplemental meetings, things like that, that I do like the idea that we just sort of reserve Mondays for council, so that if we need to have a work meeting or something like that, we could have it on the off weeks to sort of help lighten the load, so that it's not work meeting, regular meeting, closed session, things like that, or if there's things that pop up, like retreats, things like that, we have that opportunity. So I don't know if other people would like that idea of, we just say, okay, yeah, we're gonna reserve Mondays in that regard. I'm not really, I'll be honest, in favor of moving to Tuesdays, because I think the majority of us right now sit on committees, whether they meet on Tuesday. You know, I've got my life sort of planned, and it's very difficult when we move that dog dish for me to find it again, because it really kind of throws things off.
No, and that's fine, I just wanted to ask.
No, I appreciate it, and I'm just one person, so.
I actually think that's a really good idea, which is, I think, maybe a different solution to this problem is, what if we just sort of put a tentative hold on Mondays, that in the event that we have to have a special meeting or a retreat or a work session, that we would do it on a Monday, even on a Monday where we don't have a regular scheduled meeting.
There's very little on Mondays besides council. so
Right.
that would-
Okay. All right. Mr. Gearbaugh?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I mean, the Tuesday thing would make sense if we just wanted to have it the next day and not have to postpone if we needed the meeting that quickly. I'm fine, but I agree, I still believe we need to publish a resolution that clearly identifies our meetings for the year. And if we want to make these 3 recognizable holidays, we just simply do that and schedule it however for those Mondays, following Mondays.
Mr. DeLarco?
Yeah, I feel like that's, adding the Juneteenth is necessary to codify whatever resolution we go with the resolution we had before, but what we've been doing, I think works in the sense that we have the meetings on a Monday when we can in the event that there's a holiday. So if we need to rescind that prior resolution to make that continue moving forward, that would be my preference.
Go ahead.
We can easily revise this resolution and submit again. That will include then rescinding the existing resolution, naming those 3 holidays, and then stating that every effort will be made to have council meetings on Mondays, but with an annual calendar to be set.
Right, but in any other council function, for example, work meetings, retreats, if I know that they're always going to happen on a Monday, the likelihood of me being able to attend is much better.
Sure.
Good point. Councilmember Dillon.
Thank you. The one thing I will mention about Tuesdays is that we need to be mindful of it, is school board meets on Tuesdays. So our visual text will be at that location.
So City Manager O'Toole, correct me if I'm wrong, you'd like then to make some modifications and have this brought back for consideration. Is a 2-week turnaround sufficient? Okay. Then can I have a superseding motion then, unless there are objection, to postpone consideration of Resolution 22-279 to our next regular meeting on November 7th, 2022 at 7 p.m.
So moved?
Moved by Dylan, and who was the second on that?
Seal.
Seal, okay, I'll get you on the next one, Mr. Gearbaugh. All those in favor of the motion postpone, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. Motion is postponed. We will consider Resolution 22-279 in 2 weeks' time. We move on to new business item 22-280, Carlisle Wortman and Associates Rental Inspection Services, Phase 2 contract. Let's start with just a motion to acknowledge receipt from Community Development Director Harrington.
So moved.
Second?
I told Gearbaugh I'd let him be the mover on that one, Dawn, so I'm going to give you the second.
I'll take second.
All right. Moved by Gearbaugh, seconded by Kraus to acknowledge receipt. Mr. Harrington, would you like to begin?
Absolutely. Mr. Radzik from Carlisle Wortman and Code Enforcement Services is also here this evening. This should have been included with the original second reading of the ordinance, and I apologize for forgetting to include the contract Phase 2 as a second part of that same thing. Essentially, this just gives Carlisle Wortman permission from the city with this agreement to then go forward and conduct these rental inspections, begin registering entities, and coordinating with city staff on the best way to approach these inspections going forward.
Very good. Mr. Radzik, as our guest this evening, would you care to make a comment? Okay. Very good. Are there any questions for Community Development Director Harrington or our guest, Mr. Radzik from Carlisle Wortman? Easy enough. Any discussion on, well, actually, it's just a motion to acknowledge receipt, so I'm assuming there's no discussion on that. So we'll vote. All those in favor of acknowledging receipt of Mr. Harrington's memo, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. And what about a motion to approve or not to approve?
So moved to approve.
Moved by Kraus to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Kamara Sulak. Any additional discussion from the dais? Ms. Dillon?
Thank you. I just want to say how excited I am to see this project move forward. I think there's a large segment of our community that will benefit from knowing that they have safe housing. They tend to be those that are marginalized, that don't speak up for various reasons. So I appreciate that you've been very proactive in this. And then I do have one technical question for you, which is when we talked about the budget item in the memo. So is this just a complete pass-through? Do we think that there's going to be any supplemental expense to the city?
No, so per the fee schedule shared to us by CWA, as well as considerations of the city itself, there is a small margin of profit for the city, so to speak, but that will be totally captured by staff time spent on these various issues and by the software BSNA that we purchased to document enforcements, subsequent permits that are filed as a result of these inspections to bring these things into compliance. So it's not a complete pass-through because the city still is going to be spending staff time and resources on this specific item, but it is not designed to generate profit. The city does not make or lose money off of this program.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Dillon. Councilmember Kamara Sulak?
How often are we going to be reevaluating the fees? Is that going to be annual?
So I think part of that's going to be based on the cost to Carlisle Wortman themselves. So the primary fee here is the registration fee, in which the city will see the largest influx, but as a result, we also see the largest amount of staff time spent on documenting those registrants, verifying the information, et cetera. So if the inspection fee rate for Carlisle Wortman's services goes up, that might necessarily require the city to go up, but we'll have a better idea on the amount of staff time on my end and my department that's taken up by this. After we begin implementation and seeing, okay, well, we open an enforcement, or we viewed these issues, how does that impact our staff versus how much time is spent by the CWA, and negotiating through that. But it's going to be a little bit of a trial and error to begin with, but I'm confident, knowing Mr. Radzik and his years of service to not only Carlisle Wortman, but to the profession as a whole, that we're pretty spot on at the moment.
Thank you.
And I'll also add for the public's edification, that we will be finalizing a checklist of commonly reviewed items that the inspectors will be reviewing and disseminating that as well as registration info, so property owners have no surprises. It's not a gotcha. We're not out there to get you. We're just making sure that our rental units are safe and habitable for all of our residents, no matter, what your income status is, that your house that you're paying for is livable.
Very good. Anything else, Mr. Kamara Sulak?
No, I'm just very happy to see this moving forward.
Okay. I'm going to jump to Councilmember Seal, and then I'll double back to Mayor Pro Tem Gearba.
Just on page 193, I don't know if this is intended to be just an example of something, or whether this will be included in our documents, but it's going to be included. It needs to be updated. It says City of Howell right now.
Yeah, so that was just an example checklist of things that they had previously provided to the City of Howell. That is not our checklist, but that was to give you an example of what will look like.
Okay.
And for council's knowledge, we are planning, once that checklist is completed for the city, to get that information out there ahead of any actual registrations or inspections occurring, so that landlords have ample time to see that list and understand what the expectations are. And I believe that Community Development Director Harrington and Mr. Radzik have a plan to host a landlord information session that really hits that home.
Anything else, Mr. Seal?
No, sir.
Mayor Pro Tem Gearba.
And I believe that was a follow-up that we had that discussion earlier last week about making sure that whatever we do in implementing this, there is sufficient communication, not only in having maybe that type of town hall meeting or whatever for landlords, but that we properly notify non-homestead properties about this potential impact on them.
Yeah,
In some kind of mailing or something in addition to whatever we put on social media and in the newspapers.
Yeah, we have contact information, either an email address or a phone number for almost every property in the city, something we strive to do. Site plans would also be useful. So if you want to send the city your site plan for your home, that would be beneficial for all of us. But yes, that would be perfect. Yep, we'll definitely be sending that. We can pull that information easily from our permitting software.
And then when do you anticipate this to be basically starting?
It's going to be back and forth with Mr. Radzik and myself to determine how long that checklist process takes to formalize, as well as the registration process. But, I would hope in the coming months.
Because I know you have time, and a lot of things on your hands, but I would like to see this in place because I think one of my pet projects is Thorncrest, and I would like to see that moved ahead as fast as we can.
And we also have existing enforcements against that property currently active, pursuing potentially other actions against that property to ensure compliance. But obviously with the winter approaching and known issues with that specific property of not providing heat to tenants, as well as some others around the city, it's our prerogative to get out there as quickly as we can to make sure that, people are not going without heat in the winter, which is their right. So
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Any additional questions from the dais? No? Okay. Refer back to the motion here. Then we have a motion on the floor moved by Kraus, seconded by Kamara Sulak to approve. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor of approving say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. Mr. Radzik, thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening. We move on to new business item 22-282, East Belt Sanitary Sewer Replacement Construction Contract Award. This is an issue we've actually discussed ad nauseum over the course of several years, but it is an ever-evolving process. So let's start with a motion to acknowledge receipt from of the memo from City Engineer Humphreys.
So moved.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Gearba. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by CO. Engineer Humphreys, would you like to begin?
Thank you. Yes, you're right, Mayor Marl. This has been going on for years. I'm here tonight with OHM, Marcus McNamara and Sarah Barrett with OHM, who have been working on this project for the past year. Council, I believe, awarded design in September or October about a year ago, and that was in response to historic studies that have been done. We have, just for a brief background, we have 3 major sanitary collection systems. We have our wastewater treatment plant that everybody I think is well aware of at this point, that treats our sanitary sewer. But our collection system, which collects all of the wastewater and transports it to our sanitary sewer for treatment, the collection system has a lot of needs identified also in our capital improvement plan. That would be, I think, our second most critical essential infrastructure right now is our sanitary sewer collection system. The East Belt portion of that, we have 3 belts, West, Central, and East Belt. The East Belt is something that, as we just has been talked about, needing upgrades for the last few years for capacity issues, surcharging issues downstream. East Belt serves our industrial area at the most northern part of our system, North Maple Road, and our industrial area, Woodland Drive, comes down Maple Road, serves that, Maple Oaks, this middle school, comes down Old Creek, and it's just south of Michigan Avenue along Old Creek where some of our current bottleneck is at. And that's shown a little bit in our figure that's included in the so the actual scope of work associated with these improvements include sanitary and sewer improvements south of Michigan Avenue, just south of Henry, Old Creek, north of Michigan Avenue, sanitary sewer improvements and water improvements all the way up to the middle school. This project includes, because the sanitary sewer is absolutely necessary, we're also doing a full project doing water main improvements north of Michigan. The water main north of Michigan was put in the 70s. It's cast iron pipe. It's old. It's had numerous breaks. It needs to be replaced. So the water main replacement's occurring north of Michigan Avenue, as is a complete road reconstruction, some traffic signal work, a little bit of a sidewalk gap. So it's a complete project as outlined in the documents in council packets. It's a project price of just $6.245 million. This is the bid price that was opened on October 25th. Verditaire was the bidder on the project, and Verditaire, I have not, but I've had done my research since they've opened. A lot of people are really excited to work with them. I think we have a good plan going forward to get this necessary project done. We're proposing to start work on the south side of 12 after frost laws. So basically a closure before school gets out, starting south to not impact school as much. There will need to be a complete closure of Maple on the north side of 12. And we're hoping to shift to the north side come spring, right when school is getting out, for a complete closure for all of summer into the next fall. This will be a complete one-season project that will cause we'll basically be shutting down Maple north of Michigan for a portion of the project. We're talking about starting public education, and that all of those phases come this winter. We've already been in preliminary discussions with the school, and I guess after that, that's the brief background. There's a lot more to this project, but I'd be happy to answer questions.
No, that's good, and I'm glad that you emphasize, City Engineer Humphreys, that this is a complete project. And while it will undoubtedly adversely impact the community for a finite period of time during the construction season, it will undoubtedly benefit this community in that particular region for years to come. So yes. I think that the project in and of itself will be very positive on the city. Can you talk a little bit more about Verditaire? I'm not familiar, and I just did a cursory overview of my files. I'm not aware that we've ever worked with them before, but I've heard through the grapevine, based on a little bit of research I did when we went over the agenda last Wednesday, I've heard some pretty phenomenal things about them. So can you talk a little bit more about their background and experience?
Well, yes, and I understand. I also have not worked with them, but a couple of staff have worked with them on other municipalities. And I think Marcus McNamara from OHM might be able to provide a little bit more background. But my understanding is that they're good at drilling. There's a good portion of this job that includes directional drilling. So we have to get under Michigan Avenue US 12. We cannot open cut US 12. That's owned by MDOT, Michigan Department of Transportation. We're putting gravity sanitary sewer under US 12. That means that we're drilling, so that requires preciseness and it's deep. It's deep sewer that we're installing under US 12. So Verditaire, my understanding is that's their specialty, is just that. And I don't know, Marcus, if you can have any more to say on them besides that. If you want. Yes, yeah.
Well, before we open it up for questions, if our guests from OHM would like to add anything, we would welcome that.
Yeah, if you have any, because that's my basic understanding of Verditaire themselves.
Yeah, I don't have, Marcus McNamara with OHM. I don't have too much to add other than Verditaire has worked on a number of projects for our other clients, City of Ann Arbor, City of Southfield. I personally have worked with them for close to 20 years. We did check the references as well for projects they did that weren't with our clients. And they got a stellar track record, and they're more than capable. We actually had a mandatory pre-bid meeting for this project, and the 4 contractors that came that we were expecting would be likely prime contractors for this. Verditaire was, I think, one of the ones we were most excited about, hoping that they would submit. So we have no concerns with their ability to complete the work.
Very good. Why don't you hang tight, just in the event that there are questions best addressed by you. Again, this is a big project. It'll have a significant impact on the community, so I do want to afford everyone the opportunity to ask questions or raise concerns. Let me just start to my left again, and I'll end to my right. Mr. Del Orco, any questions for City Engineer Humphreys or our guests from OHM?
My main concern was about the messaging to the public, and I think that's more handled by our community development director and our city manager, and I think we have a clear path of how we can appropriately handle this. It's going to be a pretty big disruption to the community, and I just want to make sure that we provide our citizens the opportunity to be aware of what's coming forward.
Yes, I anticipate we'll have multiple town halls related to this. We've already been working with the schools because that will be a major user that is potentially disrupted in terms of traffic flow. So I know they'll be working with us to help get the message out to those who drive their students to the middle school as well.
Okay, all right.
And we'll also have the dedicated page, website for it. So I've already been in contact with PR General Sarah Macy, and we will be getting a dedicated page for this project. And like I said, we're aiming for a specific town hall on this in January. I mean, all the capital projects that are going to go next year, we're aiming for town halls this winter.
Yeah, I certainly appreciate the outreach on websites and our city's website and our social media efforts, but I think what we're learning from the community is that we really need to be sending out things in writing to people's addresses so they are aware of what's happening. We don't have a hard copy print media newspaper anymore that people can reference. So I really feel strongly about written letters to the public.
In our last capital project, we notified everybody we did just that. We invited them to our public meeting with a written letter.
Excellent, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Just a few clarifications for myself. Does this include elimination of the line that's underneath the trailer park?
It does not. That is what was eliminated. So, in fact, that line is remaining intact. The original scope of work for this project included, I want to say about 3,500 linear feet of sanitary sewer, and due to costs, we decreased that to 2,100 is what we're actually replacing as part of this, and what we eliminated was exactly the mobile home park. We are no longer straightening up. So what our current sanitary sewer route does is it comes south, it goes through the mobile home park, comes back to Maple, and then it comes through Bushes and comes down here. And we're basically, the original plan was to straighten all that up and come straight north-south. We did additional modeling, and really the driver for this is capacity and surcharging issues, and the surcharging is all south of here, so this was not needed for the capacity issue, so that's why it was eliminated from the scope of work.
And that line is probably over 50 or 60 years old, and there's no issue with it potentially?
Well, as far as rehabilitation of it could be done with a lining or something in place if necessary. So it doesn't, the 30-foot deep line does not need to be dug up and replaced for rehabilitation issues. It would only need to be dug up and replaced for capacity issues, and we don't need the capacity.
Okay. And that was another question, lining versus replacement on the water line. Is the water line the point where it can't be, or do we need to increase capacity for that line?
So, and that water line actually is a 10-inch cast. It's kind of an old, odd size pipe, and so no, we are proposing complete replacement of that with plastic pipe.
Okay. You know, as we talk about these things, we're foregoing other projects. So West Belt, Central Belt, when do we anticipate doing those projects, or what do we have in plans for those at this point?
So our long-term plan for the sanitary sewer identified some capacity issues in Central Belt, but some more concerning in West Belt. I think Central Belt, there's limited growth potential in Central Belt, and just a little bit of, I think, some I&I removal will solve our problems in Central Belt. West Belt, I'm hoping that I'm anticipating that the additional flow study that we're doing to check our current hydraulic model will help decrease some of those capacity requirements on West Belt. So to give you a scope of idea, this East Belt now contains 2,000 linear feet of sanitary sewer replacement for capacity issues. West Belt right now, we have in our plans to replace 9,800 linear feet of sanitary sewer for capacity issues. I'm hoping we can get that number down. Just like we got this down from 3,500 to 2,000, I'm hoping that West Belt comes down from 9,800 to something else when we do some remodeling and use less conservative modeling to bring our assumptions down. So West Belt is the next larger project that's on the horizon. I agree. I'm hoping it will be less than, the scope will come down though from what we are planning on right now.
Okay, great. And then this question maybe for the city manager or for yourself. Lair Farms at Bella Terrace, all their hookup fees and such will be at our new rates?
I can't speak on behalf of their rates. You mean,
tap-in fees will,
tap-in fees
those,
and all
yes,
those.
that'll be based on, the tap-in fees will be related to when the tap-in occurs. So it would be either this year or if next year's rates are already in effect.
And right now, Phase 1 has been approved, Phase 2 and 3 are, yeah. So Phase 1 is like getting built out right now in Bella Terrace.
Thank you. And then, a number of new developments have occurred on that road in the last 2 or 3 years. Are we paying for the replacement for those connections related to however we put in new water mains and sewers?
It's
Like Maple Oaks, Maple Heights? Westgate, all of those.
So
now we're putting a
Westgate's
new
north
line.
of there, but Maple Oaks is included in this, Maple Oaks is the northern portion of this project, and then just south of there is is it Maple Cove?
Maple
There's no,
Cove.
yeah,
Yep,
maybe
yep,
something just
sorry.
south of there. So, but I guess I'm not understanding your question. We are redoing the road and such in those areas.
Right, the road, but I'm saying the connections, so they've already connected to the existing
Oh.
line, so now we're having to redo all of those connections that they paid for.
I see the question. Do you understand, like, basically, are we do you have
Yeah,
the-
I mean, we'll need to connect those water mains
Yes,
to the new
yeah.
main.
Yes, we will, yes.
So okay, that's what I was thinking.
Yes.
And then the only other thing, material charges, are we anticipating if the costs go down, are they going to give us the reduction in those costs, or are we at a only if it increases type contract? So I don't know what we have in terms of our materials and such, whether or not they're based at the market right now, and do we have anything built into the contract that would adjust for that?
So it's a unit price bid, so there's 160 some odd pay items. So we did get pricing for everything that we think we're gonna need, and those are fixed. So there is not an escalator clause in the contract, nor is there a potential for, I guess, a reduction on a unit price. But if there is an unforeseen field condition and we need a different tee or something that wasn't anticipated, then we essentially ask for a quote for that. The contract lays out the process for that. If we're not satisfied that we're getting a fair deal, there's a time and material process where basically just they provide us the invoicing, so we're not paying a premium.
And is there a performance clause in the contract that it needs to be done by a certain time or penalties?
Yes, there's liquidated damages for both substantial and final completion. I don't have the date in front of me here, but next fall was the substantial completion, which would be essentially all the major items of work, all the pipe in the ground, the road put back together. We do have the contract final completion date in the spring of 2024. The reason for that is to give them a little bit of that extra grow season to get turf stabilized and everything. And there are damages, I think $2,000 a day if they fail to meet those.
And then last, MDOT, because of all the problems we've had them with this last year, are they on board? Do we have everything with them?
We're
so that this
permitted.
is- We're permitted and everything? And then Eagle also?
Yep.
All right. So it sounds like we're ready to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Gearba. Good questions. Councilmember Dillon, any questions, comments for city engineer or guest?
Thank you. I do have a couple questions. They're more logistics. So this project will stop at Maple Oaks? Or is it going beyond that? Is it going in front of the middle school and such?
No, the north limit of the project of the water main and the resurfacing is the old railroad bed.
Okay. And at some point, will we need to continue north of that? Is that a separate project?
For the road itself?
For infrastructure in general?
So for, right now, as far as the water main, the sanitary sewer, no, we're definitely capturing all the sanitary sewer needs along this portion of road. I believe that road itself, I would have to look up what the Pacer rating of that road is, but the road itself, I believe, still needs some upgrading. Yes, so we're stopping at the railroad tracks.
Okay. So that may answer a couple of my questions because I absolutely appreciate that sidewalks are a priority. There are, I believe, 3 homes that, before you get to Maple Oaks, that there's no sidewalk. It's sort of going to be a little bit of a weird traverse over those properties. But I appreciate that there are sidewalks being included. I would love to see sidewalks included for in front of electronics, because that would complete our sidewalk loop there. And the other thing that I wasn't sure if it's included, is there an enhanced crosswalk, which was something that we've talked about in front of Maple Oaks?
We don't have,
I wouldn't say an enhanced, but it will be, everything will be brought up to ADA requirements.
I think she means the, right, you're talking about the actual, like what was just installed in Woodland, like
Yes.
the rapid flashing?
Yes, I
beacon thing,
thought-
So no.
See, I thought that was a condition of Maple Oaks at one point, was that we were going to have a crosswalk there. That
And it-
was
The one
more
that's
than a
currently
standard
there-
crosswalk.
The one that's currently there being enhanced then, because there is a current crosswalk right there.
Right, but it was supposed to be a flashing light and such because of the line of sight.
I don't recall that being a formal requirement. Do you, Mr. Gearbo?
No, you'd have to review the site plan
Well,
with Maple
yes.
Oaks.
I don't have any
I don't-
objection to
yes.
doing that.
I just,
Right.
I'm stepping into the end, obviously, of Maple Oaks, and we're trying to, that's a project we're trying to accept the public infrastructure on, and it just, I don't recall seeing that on the plans, but I haven't looked for it.
That's
But,
okay, it may have just been a conversation
Yes.
because at the time, that was the only safe sidewalk passage, would you have to cross Maple to get onto a sidewalk to continue into town, or to continue north. I would love to find dollars to put in an adequate cross there. I think there's now substantial housing on that east side of Maple, and to have an avenue for students coming out of the middle school or students from the library, folks coming from the library, to have that sort of mid-block, because otherwise you are going way beyond to have a safe crossing there.
And we'll research the Maple Oaks. My guess, my bet is that it wasn't required because it's not on the punch list for it. Like, I would have, it would have been on the punch list by now if it was required. But we'll make sure, we'll first check there.
Right.
That's definitely
So-
the first place to look to see if it's owed to us by a developer.
Right. My next question, and it's a little beyond the scope of this project, but sort of this all-encompassing aspect of, I think everyone has heard that there's a lot of grumblings about traffic on Maple relative to the middle school at drop-off pickup times. This seems like it could have been a perfect opportunity to enhance that roadway. I know it's right beyond the limit of it, but if you have crews there, it seems like creating either a carve-in to the school property or such to get people off of that roadway. I do believe the school has a long-term vision of reallocating traffic through a rear entrance, but that's conditional on timing and bond dollars and such. I just think that the city needs to look at avenues of getting that traffic, that standstill traffic, off of its streets. Because with Maple being the road that it is, it does become quite a bottleneck and a safety concern with having cars at a standstill there at all times. So I don't know if whenever there's an opportunity to have those conversations with the school about enhancing that roadway, I think we should take advantage of it.
And I agree on having conversations with the schools. And I've been introduced to, I don't know what the title is, but for transportation, definitely, I agree that the ongoing discussions with the school are important to solve that problem. And that the schools need to, yes, the bond funds are a portion of funding that I know are looking at some of those solutions. I agree, getting the traffic off of Maple is the solution, not getting like they did at the other elementary schools. Getting the traffic off of Maple is the solution, I think.
And what will be the detour when Maple is closed?
Right now it goes,
What,
so for.
Woodland,
Yes.
essentially, up and around, and it'll be
Yeah,
signed
so
both
this
ways.
was, because that way we went out, but then it came around this way too, didn't it?
Yeah, there is
Because
we'll
it
have
comes
signage
through-
on both Ann Arbor
Yeah, exactly.
Street and Woodland to try to get traffic before they get into the zone and get confused, and so it'll be well signed. We do have variable message boards in the contract that can be put out in advance with some, you've seen, project starting on whatever date, so the public is aware.
So then
start
will
avoiding.
North Ann Arbor Street be the detour of the north-south route? Well, that will be, so that's gonna put a lot of cars on North Ann Arbor Street. Okay.
And Woodland, into
Yeah.
industrial.
Well, yeah, Woodland's gonna be the east-west, but we're not gonna push people through industrial.
Yes.
Yeah,
We'll push
yeah, that's.
way back
yeah,
So
there.
there'll be
yeah.
signage as you're approaching town from the east to try to grab the traffic
Yeah.
up industrial and around Woodland.
Yeah.
So that they don't get downtown and have to take Ann Arbor Street. But
Okay.
Yeah.
the traffic coming from the west
Right.
would be more likely to use Ann Arbor Street to get around. Unless they were going to the business park, then they would discontinue on through. So it's a pretty, I guess, robust, there's a lot of signage in the contract, so. And inevitably, when we do these types of projects, after we get everything put up, we make some tweaks and adjustments to make sure that it's clear for the public, and sometimes you have to change things around a little bit to make it work better.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Seal, questions for the city engineer or our guests from OHM?
Yes, sir. Thank you. In this day and age of information, I'm always baffled by how many folks we fail to reach. So when is this work actually going to begin that will require the detour?
It'll be in May. We don't have an exact date because the frost laws are different
Right.
every year a little bit, but it'll be, I would say, mid-May.
Okay, will we notify people in writing, the individual homeowners that are affected on Maple Road before then?
We do a couple different things. I know some of them have been mentioned already with the website and the town halls and that. But we do put out project-specific information, frequently asked questions. What about mail? What about trash pickup? All the things that they're impacted by with these projects. We certainly can mail those. We also do, once the project's up and running, it's a water main job, so there will be portions of time where the water has to be turned off. So we notice that a day or two in advance. We have door hangers. So we understand the importance of
Right.
constant communication for these types of projects. Coordinate with residents. This is the next thing on the agenda, but typically the way we handle it, we have continuity with our inspection team. So they get to know the people on the job site, that they know who has, may have special needs or has frequent doctor appointments or all those types of things. And our staff work directly with the residents to make sure that they have, access when they need it.
Good.
And other things like that.
I don't think we can communicate too much.
Agree.
Yep, thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Seal. Councilmember Kamara Sulak.
Yes, I have a question regarding segment 3, which is down in the Old Creek neighborhood. Is that going, it looks like that's going past Oak Brook Court, but is it going all the way to Pleasant Ridge Drive?
No, about the third house south of the condos there is the tie-in point.
It's right there at the church. It doesn't go down to Oak Brook. It's actually, I think Oak Brook Court might be what's shown right here on the southern part of that figure. Because that new Arbor Lane is not shown on this figure, right? That new Arbor Lane would be right there.
Right, just south of the school.
And just south of that
the
church
church, yeah.
there.
Okay.
And this is where, and this is the tie-in point, because this is where the sewer was actually upgraded in the 80s, was here on Old Creek, was the size of that sewer is, I believe, 20-inch that we're tying into. So it was upgraded in the 80s.
Right, because it used to be a dead end, and then it was opened up.
Yeah.
So that won't cause, well, hopefully it won't impact the school, Pleasant Ridge there too much. When you say late fall, school will be back in session.
So we'll
There'll be a reroute.
Yeah, so we're going to
around
move north of
Pleasant Ridge
Michigan.
Drive.
Yeah, we're going to move north of Michigan by like early summer. So Pleasant Ridge will be impacted. That'll be the school that'll be most impacted, probably, quite frankly, at the start of it. And then north of Michigan will be summer, rest of fall.
Right, okay. And is there any cost benefit since Verditir is in Belleville? And if there's any issues with equipment that they're so close?
Yeah, I didn't know that, yeah.
Was
Yeah,
that-
I mean, they're a local
Yeah.
contractor, like I mentioned, they have multiple crews and they do work for communities all around the area, so they have resources nearby.
Okay, so there's a less chance of, oops, we can't get something from, Macomb Township over here, especially all that big, looking on their website, all
Yeah, I
that
think
big
the
equipment.
local is a definite plus. And I will tell you also, this is a big project. Everybody acknowledges that. So talking with the contractor, this is going to be their number one focus next season. And they've already indicated to me that they were, after they submitted this bid, they're waiting for this decision before they bid additional work. Because they've made it a priority project, and if they do get awarded the job, they want to make sure they have the equipment and the staff to do it. So they definitely have made it a priority.
Great, that's all I have. Thank you for all your work on this.
Very good. Councilmember Kraus, any questions, comments for our guests?
Nothing to add to what my colleagues have already asked.
Very good. Well, unless there's anything further regarding the memo from City Engineer Humphreys, we're going to proceed to vote on acknowledging receipt. It's been moved by Gearbaugh, seconded by Seal. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. The subsequent motion will be a motion to award or not to award the East Belt Sanitary Sewer Replacement Project to Vertitaire Contracting Incorporated in the amount of $6,245,534.55 and to authorize, not authorize the mayor to execute the necessary documents.
Move to award and authorize.
Second.
Moved by CO to award and to authorize, and that was seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, is that correct?
Yep.
Very good. Staff care to make any additional comments? Easy enough? Any discussion, comments from the dais? Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh.
This is a prime example of where there isn't funding available for it. This is coming out of our funds, it's coming out of our fees, it's moving forward. We need to get this through, and this is no different than the other projects that we have going forward. I wish we did have more than one bid, but we do realize that this market is not providing for that type of thing. And I did my own research on this company too, and also they were named a few years ago as one of the top 50 companies to watch for in this country. And then also they've done projects, they were supposed to do one in Manchester, but that one apparently was abandoned. So based on this recommendation, we need to move this forward. It's something we've been talking about for more than 6 years, so I appreciate all your work you've done, Tasha. Thank you.
Okay, no, thanks.
I would just add to that, because I think this is a point that's often missed. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I messaged on this in my January State of the City address, either in 2022 or in 2021. But the state of Michigan provides zero funding to support local municipalities, cities, villages, and townships as it relates to stormwater infrastructure and stormwater management. A fact, $0. And yet these projects, when they're in need of replacement or enhancement, come at a significant cost. And it's true, the state of Michigan and federal resources provide us decent, we could debate that, I guess. Fair, maybe, is the more appropriate terminology. A fair amount for local streets and for sewer and clean water, but again, zero for stormwater infrastructure. And this is a point that has been discussed in Lansing, I believe specifically by Senator Ananek and Representative, now Senator Chang, who've talked about establishing a fund to provide municipalities with dollars to support stormwater management. I think through our contacts at SEMCOG, our involvement in MML and other regional groups, we should be stronger advocates for that. I think that would be a marvelous thing if the state were to step forward and actually lead on this issue and provide local municipalities dollars for stormwater management. I think it would benefit communities in so many ways, innumerable ways. I've been using that term a lot this evening, but I'll get off my high horse now. Thank you. Any additional comments from the dais? There appear to be none. We have a motion moved by CO, seconded by Gearbaugh to award and to authorize. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 22-283, East Belt Sanitary Sewer Replacement Construction Engineering Services. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from City Engineer Humphreys and to approve or not to approve the proposal from OHM for construction engineering services for East Belt Sanitary Sewer Replacement Project in an amount not to exceed $888,000.
Move to acknowledge and approve.
Second.
Moved by CO to acknowledge and to approve, and that was moved by CO and seconded by Gearbaugh. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Staff care to make any additional comments?
Yes, thank you. This is in follow-up to what the motion you just made. We need lots of assistance from our engineer to oversee this project. As Marcus was saying, they will be on site every day, providing documentation, making sure that this project is built to the specifications, also assisting with public engagement portion of the project, and being our rep on site. So any additional questions, the contract documents are in the packets.
Very good. Any questions for our guests from OHM or City Engineer Humphreys? Mr. Commander Sulak?
So will there be a representative there all the time during the project when it,
Yep.
and monitoring?
Yes.
Yeah, it's full-time inspection,
Good.
so any underground work, you have to be there when it's going in, because you can't see it after it's buried, right? So for all pipe work, paving, concrete, all of those things, as the job starts to wind down, we will do some spot inspection for like restoration, things that you don't necessarily need to be there full-time, but I would say for definitely the bulk of the project, any of the utility, road work is full-time.
Right. So you'll be able to quickly alert us if there's anything unforeseen or any delays, or, you know, you're running ahead of time?
Yep, projects of this nature, we typically, I would say at a minimum, have bi-weekly progress meetings, maybe even weekly. We'll get that detail worked out with DPW and engineers. But yes, we're engaged with the city on a daily basis. And we talked about the resident coordination piece, that's a big part of it. So there's coordination with that as well.
That's exactly where I want to make sure that we have good communication through the whole project, so, thank you. That's all I have.
Any additional questions? Mr. Gearba?
Can you clarify, I know we were talking about the Clark and Maple intersection, and then you're planning in this also to address for when we redo Clark Street?
Yeah, so this particular set of plans includes upgrade to the signal at Clark and Maple, some sidewalk ADA stuff at Clark and Maple, and then we have a separate project that we have federal funds. We've received about $500,000 in federal funds through WATS, Washtenaw Area Transportation. That project is set to go out for bids in March of this year. So that project is currently in what they call the grade inspection review phase at MDOT, which is part of our federal funding requirements. So Clark, that is a road reconstruction project that starts at Maple and then does the whole, half or quarter mile that is Clark Street. So that's actually tearing out that road. That's a road reconstruction project, but there is a coordination clause in this project because they will be, the idea is that they'll probably be there about the same time.
So Clark will be done at the same time?
Right now, we are planning for, yes, they're both slated for the construction season coming up.
That's what I clarified.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Any discussion on the motion? Thank you both, appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
We have a motion on the floor moved by CO, seconded by Gearba to acknowledge and to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Moving on to the last action item of the evening, which is agenda item 22-286. This is U.S. HUD grant agreement. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from City Manager O'Toole and to approve or not to approve grant agreement number B-22-CP-MI-0468 with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Move to acknowledge and approve.
Moved by CO to acknowledge and approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Delorco. City Manager O'Toole, the floor is yours.
So the city previously received notification that we were selected for a congressionally directed spending grant in the amount of $5,999. We had requested $600,000, but that's just how it works. As part of that process, we have to work with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development to access dollars, which means meeting their funding requirements. They have received and accepted our budget and our project narrative. We're in the final phases of the environmental review, and we are at a point where we can now execute that grant agreement so that we can begin moving forward with relaunching the project and the reimbursement of funds.
Easy enough. Questions for the city manager? Mr. Gearba.
Just to clarify, with a HUD grant, there's a number of requirements in terms of what they expect and what we can't do. One of the issues on here is, of course, maintaining a drug-free environment. Do we have a policy and everything in place for that to maintain and make sure that is not a concern?
Yes, within our personnel policies and within our responsible contractor policy, as you recall, we do require, and I confirmed this particular contractor does have that policy in place.
Thank you.
Additional questions for the city manager? Any discussion on the motion? That's been properly moved by CO, seconded by Delorco to acknowledge and to approve. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move to the discussion portion of our agenda. First up is Commission, Committee, and Task Force reports from council members. I'll start to my left and end to my right. Councilmember Delorco, any Commission, Committee, or Task Force reports?
Briefly, the Environmental Commission met we spent a fair bit of time discussing with DPW Director Larry Searles about putting videos out and education, working with DPW to message on the issue of overwatering lawns and provide education to homeowners about the appropriate levels to set for irrigation, taking into account whether your lawn is a newly installed lawn or whether it's a lawn that's been in place for some time, and hopefully be able to mitigate some of the issues that we've seen with oversaturation and overwatering of lawns, and saving ratepayers some money. So Environmental Commission will be working with DPW on messaging on that issue.
Thank you, Mr. Delacroix. Just to bring you up to date, we did meet with our master plan task force about 2 weeks ago it was, I believe. Maybe it was last week.
It's 2 weeks ago.
Just a reminder that we will have another meeting November 15th at Liberty School in the
Board of Education room.
Board of Education room. We encourage everyone to participate in that. It's where we do our planning and hope to have the ideas of moving forward for our master plan. Planning this week, we'll meet on Wednesday. We have a number of marijuana site plans, our preliminary site plans that'll be discussed, and also be discussing Planet Fitness and their moving forward. Risk management group met about 2 weeks ago. We discussed issues associated with the, of course, the new plant being wastewater treatment plant being built, and concerns in terms of what other issues we need to look in terms of an ongoing operation, and actually just oversight and the hiring of specific individuals to make sure that that plant works, or at least the project moves forward as well as it can. With that, I'll complete that. And moving on, Councilmember Dillon, do you have any items?
The Historic District Commission continues to meet monthly. We appreciate the collaboration between homeowners in our historic and business owners in our historic district and our commission members. We've actually gone from meeting periodically to having full agendas every month. There will be some upcoming openings on that committee. So if you have any interest in historic properties, preservation, or just want to get more involved in your community, we encourage you to apply.
Thank you. Councilmember Seal?
Yes, Cemetery Board of Appeals will meet this Thursday at 3 p.m. here in the council workroom.
Councilmember Camaro Sulak?
Yes, last Wednesday, we celebrated a successful, we had a celebration for the Day of the Dead at the 109 Exchange. And it was well attended, and we had some very thorough decorations, and it was very authentic. So I appreciate everybody that showed up, and that's all I have.
Councilmember Kraus.
Thank you. Arts and culture, the little art library is going in soon up by the farmer's market area. Councilmember Dillon had asked about this on email. We were waiting for a local resident to take time out of his schedule, working full-time to build it, so it's been a while. So it's built, and we are going to vote on the costs to install that in a special meeting coming up. So it should be in before frost. I mean, or before it freezes, if the weather continues like it has been. So look forward to that. That will be super fun. We did receive a $100 donation from a citizen for art around town. A reminder for folks we have art posted all around town. It's really neat. On our Facebook page, we've been mentioning the artists and a little bit background about them. That's been kind of cool. Healthcare Task Force, we did elect new officers since I am leaving. And we will be asking council for more time at some point. The healthcare organization that we are talking with is still very interested, and we don't want to leave them while talks are positively going forward. And so look forward for that to come, that request to come for Healthcare Task Force.
Very good. Thank you. Reports or other announcements? Again, I'll start to my left and end to my right. Councilmember Delorco, any reports or announcements?
I have none.
Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh.
None.
I made reference earlier and in my weekly communique to City Council about an upcoming budget town hall that'll either be scheduled for November the 29th or 30th, likely here in council chambers, beginning at either 6 or 6:30 p.m. We'll finalize a press release likely on Wednesday and then disseminate that through our proper channels. We'll be doing kind of a deep dive into city finances, our budget, capital expenditures, and of course we will provide an update on the wastewater treatment plant rehabilitation. That's all I have. Councilmember Dillon, any reports or announcements?
Vote vote tomorrow.
Second.
If you are voting in person, there are 2 polling places out of Liberty School. There are 2 polling places out of the Methodist Church. If you have an absentee ballot that you've already received, it needs to come back to City Hall. This is where absentee ballots are being accepted.
Clerk Royal, I'm glad that Councilmember Dillon brought this up. For the public's benefit, precincts have changed. So their polling location for where they vote in person may be different than in years past. You want to speak a little bit to that and where they could go to find additional information?
Well, we did send out all new voter cards, so everybody should have received a new voter card, and it does state on there where you're voting, but precincts 1 and 2 are at Liberty School, and at 3 and 4 are at the Methodist Church. And you can find where you're registered either online, or you can call the clerk's office, and we'll be glad to tell you where you should vote at.
Very good. And actually, if you were to show up at the wrong polling location, most of the workers would be able to identify where you live geographically and refer you to the correct location. Which again, it's either Liberty School or the Methodist Church, but we're evenly divided now because we have 4 precincts. So 2 at Liberty, 2 at the Methodist Church. Very good. Mr. Seal, any reports or announcements?
Nothing, Your Honor.
Councilmember Kamara Sulak.
Nothing further.
Councilmember Kraus.
I just wanted to mention about our move. My council colleagues know that I am planning to move, and indeed, we have moved. We are still maintaining possession of our home in Saline, so I can still be on council, and that should not cause any issues. We will not lose possession of the house or leave possession of our Saline home until my term has been faithfully executed. So if there are any questions with that, people are free to email me, but I will continue to serve in my role.
Very good. Thank you, Councilmember Kraus. If there are no additional reports or announcements, then I will defer, I believe, to the city manager to give us an update on water and sewer rates. We had several questions and concerns and areas of interest that were discussed 2 weeks ago, and I think you're prepared to report out at least on some of those this evening.
Certainly. So I can report out that the credits related to the longer than average utility billing cycle have been issued. A reminder that this is just the credit for the difference between the old utility billing rates and the new utility billing rates. So it did not actually change any usage. And if you had low consumption, it was a relatively nominal impact, $15 to $20 in a typical case. So the usage does still appear high because that period is still longer than normal. In most cases, probably 23 to 26% longer. But if there was any issue with the meter read at the end of August, it could be even longer than that. I have seen cases if there was a meter read error, it could be upwards of a 40% longer period of time. We are committed, though, to making sure that all bills are as accurate as possible. So that is that credit for the difference between the 2 billing rates is now accurately reflected for the 97% of users that were impacted. The longer summer billing cycle, though, did mean that the previous quarter, the spring quarter, was also shorter than usual. So again, just stressing to individuals, trying to compare your spring 2022 usage to your summer 2022 usage is definitely going to show a discrepancy because one is artificially low and one is artificially high in terms of the period of time that it covers. And then, of course, normal seasonal factors like the summer months just being higher usage periods. As to the exact percentage increase of the impact that the rate increase had on residents, that is variable based on total usage. I think we've certainly learned our lesson. We won't try and assume a specific gallon rate as an average, but rather provide more of a range when we go through the rate study this next time around. I would say in most cases, that rate increase was between 30 and 40% just as the rate increase itself, but it really depends on whether your usage remained consistent from one period to the next. And as we know, the billing cycle from spring 2022 to summer 2022 did not remain consistent. There was dramatic differences between those 2 rates at times. For as close to accurate as we can get, factoring in the difference between the summer billing month or this billing cycle being longer, summer 2022 is probably most comparable to summer 2020 in terms of the heat and the lack of precipitation. So we have encouraged residents to look at that as a comparison, and if that looks like it's 30-ish% higher, then you probably are still within a reasonable range. Staff, myself, and Treasurer Cole especially, are still meeting with residents, still very happy to meet with residents. Anyone that has an outstanding utility billing question, especially any individuals who might be in that situation where they had catch-up usage. So an old meter where the interior and exterior components didn't match up, and now a catch-up is being calculated as a result. We're happy to talk through that billing process and help where we can. One thing I will note about one of the questions that came up during the public comment, the city maintains on its website financial data typically from the past 3 years, but the state of Michigan, specifically their community engagement and finance page through the Department of Treasury, has a document search function that lists all of the communications with the Treasury dating back to 2003, which includes all of our audits. And they also have the My Community Financial Dashboard, which summarizes all of the financial data of the city back to 2010. So I'm happy to answer any additional questions, but we do have Attorney Chubb here today to respond to any questions of council, especially related to utility billing and the Revenue Bond Act.
Okay. Well, again, let me start to my left and on to my right. Mr. Delorco, any questions, comments for the city manager?
So my understanding is that when we look at rates moving forward for the next fiscal year, we're going to not do that as part of our normal budget cycle. And we're going to wait for the bids to come in to get a final cost on the project of the wastewater treatment plant, and then contemplate how we would look at those rates in a much more thorough way, using different ranges of numbers after we know what the final cost of the project is going to be. And those rates wouldn't take effect until December.
Correct. Going into this next budget season, I do not anticipate that we will have rates set for FY24 until starting December 1, and that's because we want to wait until we get the actual bids back. We can use actual numbers. We now know the interest data. We just don't know that final piece of, what the bid is going to be. We have an estimate. I feel our estimate was relatively conservative, considering we just completed it within the last 6 months. But we want to make sure we have the most accurate data possible. That will also give us additional time if federal or state support comes through to factor that into our calculations.
Okay. And for the current issues that we're facing with water being charged that went into the sewer that for irrigation where people didn't have the second meter, have we arrived at some idea of how we want to address that?
Yes, Treasurer Cole is still working through the issuance of credits for those individuals that had requested a meter or were not able to get one. Again, we do still have meters in stock. I can say that it appears that the new meter system is actually going to result in a slightly less expensive meter than the old meter system. So I expect that Director Searles or Treasurer Cole will make a recommendation via a resolution to our fee book to hopefully slightly decrease the currently $500 fee that it costs. But I don't anticipate that'll be a massive, and we're not talking about like slicing it in half, because there still is the physical cost of the meter, but possibly in the $425 to $450 range.
Okay. So that's roughly half of what it was before then, the second meter. Weren't they $1,000 to get a second meter before?
So that's with the cost of a plumber. The other thing that we can do to drive down the cost, and I think this will come to an ordinance change, is, removing the requirement to have a backflow preventer, which I guess is stipulated currently through our ordinances, and we'll have to bring it to the code review committee to consider a revision to that.
That's for underground irrigation systems, right?
Yes, that's specifically related to second meter irrigation systems.
Right. Okay. So that addresses getting second meters, encouraging people to get second meters and addressing the irrigation issues. But for the customers that have already paid those sewer charges, are we looking into a credit or a percentage or some type of remedy or relief there?
So the relief was only for the individuals who were specifically impacted by not being able to access the second meters at this point. I would, I guess, defer to Attorney Chubb more on why there's limits to how much discretion we have over the issuance of credits or rebates.
Okay.
Yeah, good evening, Honorable Council. Thank you so much for this opportunity. So I did provide a memorandum to everyone dated October 31st on these issues. And so generally, under the Revenue Bond Act, you know, there is an obligation of the municipality to charge not less than what it costs to provide water services. And so that's why we routinely do these rate studies. So the last one was the Baker-Tilly study that was done June 2022. And we really have to, you know, that really takes in not only just your commodity costs, but the bigger overall cost is really looking at your, you know, several-year capital improvement plan. And when we look at, you know, whether it be water line replacement or what's going to happen in the wastewater treatment plant over the coming years, that's where you really have to factor in there's a lot of complexity to it because these are obviously some humongous expenses that we really need to get into the reserves and account for it across the rates that all the customers are paying. And so when we look at those potential refunds, like you were referencing, for those that had 1 meter, that some of it was dedicated to irrigation, I was working with closely, or I am working closely with the city manager and the treasurer. To the extent that we can come up with finite, accurate numbers, then we can engage in potentially moving forward with refunds. But in those circumstances where it's really seemingly a guess, you know, there's so many different factors as to how often they use the irrigation system, how big the irrigation system is, that I don't think that we could do it in a manner that would be with enough specificity that we would meet the obligations of the state law requirements for ensuring that we do accurately charge for the water.
I'm going to raise one issue there that wasn't raised in your memo, in that the city just went through an exhaustive effort to replace all of our old meters with new, sophisticated meters that are indeed capable of rendering that data that you just mentioned. We now have meters in place that can tell us the difference between a system that is continuously running and a system that has leaks in it. And there should be no argument brought forward from a legal perspective that we cannot reliably estimate how much water is being used and in what capacity and in what fashion.
So one thing I would add to that is we will be considering, for example, developing policies around that question. At this point, we can't go backwards in time and reliably determine usage. One thing that we have considered is, for example, pools. It would be possible with some work in coordination with a resident and staff, for example, testing before a pool is filled and after a pool is filled, to then provide a sewer credit for that portion. I would caution capacity-wise against going much further than that, because we don't have the staff time. There's still a physical staff requirement for us to perform that read. The resident can't self-perform the reads because we have to have an accurate picture in time from what the difference is. You know, you can't have a...
You're talking about for the pools?
Yeah, for pools. So there would need to be some coordination. There would need to be a policy developed around it. Right. But again, with irrigation, though, the second meter is the most accurate tool because it's always going to tell us precisely what is being used for irrigation alone.
Right, and I understand that moving forward, but I'm just trying to figure out what we can do now to address charges that we collected from residents on sewer charges that weren't justified.
Under our current rate structure, they are legally justified.
Okay, I will rest my questions there.
Thank you, Mr. Delarico. Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, any comments, questions for city staff or legal counsel?
I guess one clarification for Ms. O'Toole could mention. You mentioned about what we would need in terms of states or other outside support in order to not have a rate increase. And I believe the figure was $26 million.
26 or 28 million, yes.
So in that situation, there is no real, I mean, we're talking right now only, what, approximately $6 million that we're getting?
Yeah, 6.2 million, and we have requests outstanding for another 9.5, I believe, about. We have two separate requests in.
So unless someone wins the lotto tonight and gives us a big gift, we still have to have rate increases.
Yes, though every dollar we get in federal or state dollar is certainly less of an impact on the system and more nominal increases as opposed to dramatic increases.
Thank you.
A follow-up question on the points you made, City Manager O'Toole reference, incentivizing or reducing the cost of the second meter. And that's a topic that you and I discussed when we were setting the agenda for tonight's meeting this past Wednesday. So a formal recommendation is forthcoming. Do you expect that at our next meeting, at our first meeting in December? And when would we be prepared to basically announce a package or seek council support for a program that reduces the cost, incentivizes the installation of a second meter, especially for those property owners who have irrigation systems?
So I would anticipate that as part of the first meeting in December, in which Treasurer Cole and I are planning to present on numerous cost-benefit analysis situations. So this would be one of them. Hopefully by then, by our next meeting, I'll actually have a resolution for you on a revision to, at the very least, the permit fees and the cost on our end associated with the meters now that we have the new meters going in.
Very good. And Attorney Chubbs, I did review your memos. I've been swamped this past week, and obviously tomorrow's not good for me. But I will plan to follow up with you sometime this week, because I would like to discuss those more and do a little bit of deeper dive on the possibility of providing some relief, especially during the summer months, for people who are not actually using all of the sewer capacity they're charged for. But we're not going to resolve that tonight. Just want to give you a heads up that I will be following up with you. Thank you, by the way. I appreciate you being here. Councilmember Dillon, any questions, comments for legal counsel or staff?
So just for clarification, people that don't have a second meter that choose to water have been paying the sewer fee all along. So this is just the increased rate. So this is not something new that's come along. This is a fee that you've already been paying year after year if you do not have a second meter.
Correct.
So,
Correct, yes. If you do not have a second meter and you choose to water your lawn, you have been paying water and sewer on it since then. Since you've, installed an irrigation system or since you've chosen to water a lawn.
correct, okay. So I guess moving forward, I would like to see all new construction have a second meter put in. If they're going to have irrigation systems, if HOAs are going to require watering to have green grass, then that should be a part of the build-out, is to have those second meters put in right from the get-go.
Yeah, yes, and I know in some communities ordinances exist where they actually require a smart meter be put in, not just any meter, but one that analyzes the saturation in the soil itself to make sure it's not overwatering.
I was going to get to that because there's nothing worse than watching sprinkler systems going while it's a pouring rain.
I would be happy to work with Community Development Director Harrington to provide an example of an ordinance like that to our Code Review Committee.
I think that would be excellent. Thank you.
In addition, it could also be added as a condition for any sort of development agreement, PUD, et cetera. So even if we see a new development before such an ordinance could be written, which I don't anticipate in the event, we can still have provide as a condition to one of those things, because I believe that would be reasonable. Mr. Chubb, correct me on that.
Very good.
Thank you.
Mr. Seo, any comments or questions?
Nothing, Your Honor.
Councilmember Kamir Sulak?
Nothing further.
Councilmember Kraus? No. Okay. Well, there's nothing further on this issue. We'll revisit again in 2 weeks' time on November the 21st. Tony, thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate your time this evening. City Manager O'Toole, are you taking the lead on this last item, or is Mr. Harrington? I believe we received some inquiries, some complaints regarding campaign signs, and there might be some forthcoming changes, or at least we might be considering some changes to our campaign sign ordinances.
Sounds good. So I oversee code enforcement as part of my job as the community development director. Now, if there was ever a less contentious and less fun issue than political signs, it would be better. But essentially, one of the most common reasons why municipalities brought to the Supreme Court is over regulating political speech, such as campaign signs. So usually it's a very difficult subject to get into, it's a very difficult subject to regulate, and it's one we do with extreme care and caution as we don't want to put the city in a precarious position. We have no interest in influencing any election. Our goal is simply to enforce beautification and non-blight standards in the form of small signs or large signs potentially on the road. So currently, our standard is that in non-residential or professional business districts, you're allowed to have a sign that's up to 16 square feet. In residential and professional business districts, I would have to look at it. I believe it's 4 or 6 square feet that is permissible. We brought to our attention that we currently have existing campaign signs all throughout the city that are in violation of the 16 square foot ordinance. In addition, there are problems with the ordinance that I'll get into in a second. So to address the signs that we have found to be larger than the appropriate amount of 16 square feet, usually these complaints are brought to us by residents as we're primarily a complaint-driven code enforcement staff, as we're relatively small compared to other larger municipalities. We are addressing those signs. We're providing courtesy notices to property owners. If the sign is in the right-of-way, the city, per our ordinance, has the right to remove the sign, and we keep them in the basement of City Hall. And anyone from the campaign or the property owner or whoever it might be is welcome to come collect that sign. Now, in the event that a larger than allowed sign is on private property, we have to follow our standard code enforcement civil infraction process. So usually it's a courtesy notice letting the property owner know that they are in violation. We give them some time. We follow up with a subsequent courtesy notice to give them a final warning. And at that point, we still don't achieve compliance. We use a civil infraction to try to achieve that compliance that the owner can either pay or potentially go to court with the city about the specific infraction. So signs that have been too large, we have properly noticed all of them that they need to be removed. If they continue to stay in noncompliance, they would then have to go through the second notice process and then subsequent civil infraction. Going forward, we will do a better job at managing and reviewing the signs that we see put up, measuring them when they're put up rather than letting them exist in perpetuity, and enforce it closer to the beginning of the campaign season. We also need to review the ordinance for a variety of reasons. So one of the tactics that's common with campaign signs is using posts or other things to elevate the sign off the ground as opposed to traditional yard signs. Our ordinance is not very clear on whether that should be counted as part of the height or if that's totally separate, if you're measuring the banner or the message on the sign alone or other supports used to do it. So that's one of the aspects that we'll need to clarify. Additionally, our language surrounding what districts things are allowed in is kind of hazy. We are not allowing campaign signs in residential and professional business districts to be larger than 4 or 6 square feet. What is the downtown district? Because it's a form-based district. Is it underlyingly residential or is it underlyingly commercial? We need to specify which zoning districts of the city that we're considering when we're talking about those things. So including, supports, including that, and then, a consideration of, do we want campaign signs to be 16 square feet or not? Do we want them to be larger? Do we want them to allow them in different places at different sizes? These are all considerations that we need to take underway. It was my first campaign season here as the community development director, so these are pretty typical problems that other municipalities deal with, but I have no doubt that, working with you all, the code review committee and the planning commission, we can create a better sign ordinance, and then in the future, really properly notice these campaigns, not in a mean manner, but just letting them know these are our regulations surrounding campaign signs, and we'd really appreciate if you follow them. Lastly, the concern we've had doing a lot of the code enforcement too is that property owners aren't aware that they can remove things on their property if they don't belong to them. Even if it was in the right of way, you have the right to remove the temporary sign as well. Obviously tell the city and we'll remove it for you and we can have them collect it. But if someone puts a sign on your property, you don't have to let it stay there. It's your right to remove it, whether that be a contractor that you might have hired so long as it wasn't in a specified agreement, but especially if a politician or anybody else puts a sign on your property without your consent, business, residential, otherwise, you can remove it. It's not incumbent upon you to leave it there. The city does not punish you for removing signs that were placed illegally on your property.
Very good. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, from speaking to some members of your staff, there were some large signs placed within the corporate limits of Saline during this election cycle, in which the candidate or candidates committee did not ask permission prior to putting the sign up.
I don't want to make that statement so definitively, but yes, that was the conversation we had with property owners. Seemed to be a little hazy on whether or not there was ever formal permission given to place those signs there. But I'm not out here to make a definitive statement that anyone.
I guess regardless, looking at this from a candidate perspective, I think just a good rule of thumb, whether you're a first-time candidate or whether you've been doing this for several decades, it's best to ask permission from a property owner prior to putting up your sign. You will avoid a lot of mishaps and confusion if you get that permission first.
Right, and I will add that we've had a couple specific instances of property owners saying, hey, we did not consent to this, and they're not available or able to remove them themselves. So the railroad, for example, does not really manage all the land that they own, so proactively, we were alerted that there was a campaign sign on the railroad property. They asked us to remove it, and with that explicit consent, we were able to remove the sign, but we are not out here removing signs unless they are on city property.
So you'll be taking this, you'll be bringing this matter forward at an upcoming code review committee meeting?
Yes.
And I support that. I think it's been, I think the last substantive revisions to our campaign sign ordinance were after the 2002 election. So it's been essentially 20 years. So I think it's worth reevaluating, and I look forward to hearing the consensus and discussion from code review. We'll go left to right again. Any comments, Mr. DeLarco?
Oh, no, I look forward to seeing that ordinance review come through Code Review Committee.
Very good. Mr. Gearbaugh?
Actually, we did review it for freedom of expression and all that just within the last year and a half because there was a Supreme Court case that held up the recent sign ordinances that we put in place. But a number of these changes that you mentioned over the last 25 years have gone in back and forth. But the size issue, where we went to the 16 square foot signs, that was something that was changed at one point, maybe 10 years ago, and I don't think they looked at it close enough in terms of what an eyesore or what a potential, it's almost like a billboard that's out there. And maybe it was supposed to be more zoned for like industrial land sales and large parcels where there may be something in terms of being able to promote it. And I don't know, because you cannot present, the content of the sign is an issue, but I think we can control the size. The other thing I would think is whether or not how many signs can go on a property, whether or not that is something that can be addressed. I mean, the ones that are on the CVS property next to Dairy Queen, that's just incredible. That could be a fire hazard alone with all the paper that's sitting there. But it's just that kind of thing, and we don't want to prevent people from expressing their due rights, but it does get to a point where it becomes a hazard or dangerous because you can't see around the corner, or it's a sight line issue or something like that.
So I have 2 points to that. So first of all is that the lot next to Dairy Queen is not owned by the city. It's a very common misconception that we own or operate any part of that parcel. In fact, how it's platted, it actually goes into Michigan Avenue. So we don't own any right-of-way on that property either. So people commonly put signs there with or without CVS's permission, unbeknownst to me. But it's a very common place to put signs. But we, like I mentioned, we do not have the right to remove those signs as it's not our property. As for the size of the signs and the number of them, I think the number of the political messages on your property that are displayed, I think that would be where we would run into an issue, but I do believe we have the right to more carefully look at size. And if we really did want for industrial properties to have larger banners for candidates, we could obviously consider that. I know that's not your preference, but I'm rather indifferent on the issue. I'd follow your policymaking and your discretion on it.
Councilmember Dillon.
So I'm going to look at it from the backside of what Wednesday looks like. And we have all of these signs all over our community that are not for candidates that are in this area. At what point is somebody going to start picking those up? It's sort of an awkward thing because some of them end up being sort of in no man's land and no one knows what to do with them. They're not city-owned property. So then do they just stay there until we have a windstorm and somebody prays they go away? Or what happens with them? Because year after year, that's a really big problem in this community with the leftover signage.
Right, so with some of the candidates that I've already corresponded with because of the size of the signs or the location of the signs, I've also learned, we have a specific provision over the time in which the sign has to be removed post-election. So the other option for us too is we have a specific abatement section in our temporary signs or in our sign ordinance itself that states that the city can pursue action to remove signs by going through the Planning Commission. I haven't looked too carefully at that process yet, but I imagine that is on the horizon if a lot of these signs stay. Thankfully, for local candidates, we have their contact information for council. We have their contact information for the school board. So we have the ability to let those people know that those signs need to be removed. Longer term, though, in terms of temporary signs, I think we have to reevaluate the way we look at it because the current process is rather encumbersome of staff to relegate and regulate the number of signs allowed on specific properties. For example, common placement of signs is that Dairy Queen lot for non-political functions like the school play. Historically, the city's permitted those signs to be there. We don't necessarily have a right to permit them to be there, but it's more been a common practice that has been respected for 30 years now, as long as this policy has existed. But that whole process needs to be reevaluated because us taking time to put stickers on people's signs is not really a good use of staff's time either. So.
I appreciate that. And then I'm going to sort of veer off a little bit on this, which is the process of, like this item in particular, going to code review. This is the body that makes policy. I feel like at times we're sending things to code review and they just sort of, they go there to die. That's a group that meets once a month and it can take months before things come back, and then it comes back to us and we're like, well, that wasn't what we really meant. So I feel like we need to review the process in which things go to code, whereas, whether it's this body has an idea of what we want to be in ordinance, then it goes to legal to find out if that's even a viable option, and then code review is maybe writing that policy, and then it comes back. But I just feel like we've got a giant bowl of spaghetti right now, and we're not always the most effective in doing things. Sometimes with, we just recently reviewed our sign policy, and there's pieces in it that we should have addressed more to it. And I feel like we sometimes get pigeonholed into, we want to deal with this one issue, and we don't look at things in totality.
Right. No, I totally understand that. I think part of my goal as a staff liaison to code review is to make it a more fluid process, both between staff instigating processes. So our last agenda was actually all 3 items that the city engineer and then myself added to bring to council's attention, but to ask for their feedback on about whether or not, they think that the ordinance is clear enough or if it needs to be changed. There's always some lines there because we're very cognizant that it's not a policy body. Mr. DeLorco can probably speak to that as well, that we make sure that we're identifying what is the policy question here that's not really meant for you to address, but what is the structure and regulation aspect that needs to be considered. I do appreciate the code review format because it gives us more time, and I think it's a unique aspect of our city to really evaluate the nitty-gritty aspects of ordinances that might get lost in a body like this. Which is more policy-based. So there are aspects and there are pros and cons to it, but I'm open to hearing suggestions, and I am open to having the body meet more often as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Seal?
Yes, I got lost in all the conversation. Does our current sign ordinance as it pertains to political signs tell when they must be removed?
I believe it's 3 days after the election, at which point we would then, as I said, pursue our code enforcement practices. So courtesy notice is courtesy notice, civil infraction, and then it's a scaled thing. So if you continue to commit the infraction or don't resolve the infraction, the fee or the fine goes up. But yes, so that's one option. Otherwise, the abatement process that we can instigate through the Planning Commission per our code would be another option. Once again, it gets a little hazy there with political speech, though, about what the appropriate action is to take with some of those items.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Kamara Sulak?
My questions have already been asked and answered.
Very good. Councilmember Kraus?
Same.
Very good. We'll look forward to hearing more about this topic in the ensuing months, Mr. Harrington. Thank you very much. We've come now to the second public comment period. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Are there any citizen comments? And again, at this time, you can speak to any issue that is of interest to you. None in the audience? Clerk Rowe, did we receive any in writing? That's correct. Sorry. Okay. One last call. Okay. Please note our upcoming meetings, including our last meeting of the year, which will be on December the 19th at 7 p.m. If there's nothing further to be brought before Saline City Council this evening, the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn this regular meeting at 9:13 p.m.
Motion to adjourn.
Moved by Kamara Sulak, and was that seconded by Gearbaugh?
Correct.
Okay. All those in favor of adjourning say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.